Word. How you doing? Cheers.
Hey, how's it going?
Cheers.
I gotta open mine first. Hang on.
I'd give you my bottle opener, but
I got one. I got an opener that doesn't open beer. Well, hang on. I'll be fine.
That is cool, Mike.
I managed to get a wine opener. I guess that's a sign from above, huh?
Yep.
There we go.
Cheers.
I'm actually starting out with a Swedish beer here, Poppel's Imperial Russian Stout.
I've got the default.
Oh, you're doing the thing, huh? You're doing the Hanneman beer, huh?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Is it Heineken?
It's Heineken, but it's this like 007 themed one.
Ooh, smooth. That's kind of nice, though.
Yeah. So.
No, I guess it is kind of childish, but I do like everything that's dark. You know, so
right.
It's porters and stout, it's coffee, it's blood sausage, it's like German rye bread that looks like you scraped asphalt off of the Autobahn. It's dark chocolate and music, of course.
Yeah.
So everything dark goes down. That doesn't mean I don't like My Little Pony. I do. I watched it yesterday with my kids. But for now, I think this one with a nice head would work fine.
All right.
Cool.
So we're recording now. We have literally the ever-flowing stream of a list of clip notes here to get through. So it's you, me, and I guess the Sands of Time in Sweden right now. It's great, which is awesome. And because you have this sweet mic right now, it's come through even better. So
actually an old 70s. Hang on, let me see. Like an old 70s like interview mic here that I've got going. So,
it's cool.
Condenser mic.
It's like the late night with Orvar.
Kind of a little bit like that.
Yeah.
So,
cheers. Let's start off. I guess everything probably started in the 70s and 80s that led towards what we know as like Swedish metal. So why don't we start there and try and figure out everything that was going on then?
Sort of set the scene for why things went the way they were. Well, I was born in '74, which I think is it's sort of right at the bottom age-wise of the first wave of Swedish death metal. Most of us were born, I would say, like I think 71 to 74 is the where most of us were born.
Right.
Some were a little bit older, and obviously a slew of people that were younger that came afterwards. But and so I mean, I can clearly remember the 70s, and 70s in Sweden were, you know, they were special, and a lot of people now, I think, as in many countries, people look back and they go, oh, it was so dreary, and it was weird, and it was blah blah blah. Except if you grew up in the States, everyone goes, oh, it's really cool, and everyone listened to Black Sabbath. And you're like, no, they didn't. You know, they were listening to, I don't know, into Ronstadt, or I don't know. It's just like, you remember what you want to remember.
Right.
I had a really, really, really great childhood. There's really nothing I can sort of pick out if I would ever end up on a bench with a shrink, you know. Everything was fine. But I grew up way, way out in the countryside.
Right.
I mean, the town I sort of grew up in probably had like 3,000 people, and I grew up outside of that. So it was just like farmland and dense forests and stuff like that. So in the 70s, I mean, you obviously remember, but if anyone who's a bit younger is listening right now, you're really closed off. I mean, where I grew up, there wasn't even a record store. So there was a record store about half an hour by car away.
Right.
That was just like a regular store. They would have some decent stuff, but it wasn't like the coolest record store you've ever been to. Right. But for me, it was the only record store I'd ever been to. Now, I was lucky enough to be born in a music-interested family. I was super middle class, I would say. Yep. I had 2 teachers for parents, and that might not sound that luxurious, but this was way out in the country. So most of my friends had one working parent the father, and they work either in maybe some sort of lumber-based, like wood-based factory, like making windows or chairs or stuff like that, or be into farming. Right. And the mom would be a stay-at-home mom. So having two sort of at least academic parents, and both were working, I realize now as an adult we had it better off than most of my friends.
Yep.
And most importantly, we had culture and music and literature, and we traveled. Most of my friends the farthest they'd ever been was, once grandma turned 70 and we drove for 2 hours. And I had been to Italy or the UK, and, it was just different. We would drive, we would go on this. We didn't go in like an RV or a camper. We would drive, and then we would stay like these small like Gasthauses in Germany and stuff like that. But mom and dad really liked to travel, and so I was really lucky that way. You got exposed to stuff, but most importantly, I was the youngest child. Right. So my oldest brother was 12 years older than me. So when I was in kindergarten, he had long hair and a mustache and was listening to Deep Purple. So I got that for free. And I mean, it's something you can laugh about now, but in an age, in a time before the internet, having an older sibling that really steeped you in cool music was incredibly important.
That was me and my sister, for sure. I know it.
Yeah. Or having a friend or whatever it is. But so I mean, and I realized that further down the road. I mean, I took all of that stuff for granted. He had a really good record collection for that time. I mean, obviously, I have a better one now, and friends. I mean, like, if we're going to Scott Carlson, it'll put it to shame. But for being that time and living way out in the middle of nowhere, he probably had at least 500-600 LPs, and it was all cool 70s stuff. So I grew up with Kiss and Purple, and Sabbath, and he would play me, stuff that my friends had never heard of, like Dust, Frank Marino, and stuff like that.
Wait, he had Dust?
And it's kind of funny that years and years later, being friends with Nicke Andersson, mm-hmm. and having been friends with Nicke Andersson for several years, when he started getting into rock, and what eventually led to stuff like the Helicopters, he said, I've discovered this awesome band called the MC5. You really got to hear this. And I'm like, all the 3 albums at home. I heard this before I, could wipe my own butt. So you get that sort of stuff for free.
Yeah.
There's an interesting anecdote here, by the way, that I realize some people might want to hear. Mm-hmm. And there's no way, like any good story, there's no way to really confirm this. But I have talked at least to their manager at the time about it, and he said, yeah, that probably happened. So I'm just going to tell it as truth. My brother's heard this, and that is that my brother got offered to be lead vocalist for Heavy Load.
No, really?
Way back. Because this was, I think this is right after the first album. And they were trying out several different vocalists, and they wanted to have a solo vocalist and many different things. And my brother used to go down to Stockholm and hang out at a record store that we're going to talk about later that was really, really important to Swedish death metal, which was called Heavy Sound. Right. And he was hanging out there, and he met people there, and he met the Heavy Load brothers. And he was singing in some local sort of Deep Purple-ish bands, the one called Shiva. And he was asked to be a vocalist for them. But this was back in the day, and he was probably like 17 or 18 or whatever, and it just didn't happen, And it would have really made would have been a big difference in my life if my big brother had been the vocalist in Heavy Load. But I guess things happened anyway, so that was sort of it. But I think, growing up further and turning sort of from kindergarten into school, the closest I can pinpoint what my childhood was like is Stranger Things. it's scary how close Stranger Things comes to exactly that sort of small town.
Yeah.
We were really into Dungeons and Dragons. I had an older brother who was listening to cool music, showing me. It was just so many different things, also sort of the people around it, sort of the tough, the kind of bully guy with a mustache and stuff like that. It was just so much. And when we watched like the first episode of Stranger Things, my teenage daughter looked at me and said, "This is just silly, Dad. This is they made your life. This is exactly what you've been talking about for 10 years." So, but it was really close to that sort of vibe and that sort of small town, and that's really cool because in my experience, Sweden in the 80s. There was a lot of variety as far as musical tastes went, but way out in the countryside, there was a rock culture and a hard rock culture that really, as soon as you got to a small town, people were listening to Depeche Mode. But if you were really like out in the countryside, I can remember going to when I went to junior high, the smallest, cutest girls were listening to Bon Jovi, and the toughest guys were listening to Motorhead and Venom. But everyone was listening to rock. That was it. You listened to rock, and that's just the way it was. If you went to a party and someone's parents weren't home, it'd be Mötley Crüe blasting or Def Leppard, So it was at least a sort of a rock vibe, and then Metallica and stuff came along, and things were sort of progressively getting harder, but we were the only ones, me and my friends, that went beyond that. And that all changed for me probably around, what could I have been? 12? Or something like that.
Is this like...
I think I've got let me see if I have... Did I bring that? No. So since this was before the internet, there were two main sources of like hard rock and heavy metal input. If you were a kid in Sweden in the 80s, one was a magazine called OK. And if you're from Germany, I would say OK was really close to what Bravo was in Germany. Yep. So it had everything music-wise. Here's a perfect example. It's a cover. So you've got, not even sure who that is. Probably someone from like Duran, something like that. And you got a Madonna poster, and you got Kiss with makeup, and you got Chris Holmes and Blackie. Yeah. And you've got interviews with Mötley Crüe, except Sylvester Stallone, Dee Snider, Depeche Mode. So it was just like every sort of young culture that you could find.
So it's like a kind of like a pop variety magazine of a sort.
Yeah, but they would include
the heaviest stuff.
They really wanted. How should I put this? They really didn't have a lot of boundaries. Yeah. They just wanted to sell magazines.
Yeah.
And I know from a fact now, it was a documentary done in Sweden on this magazine, and they said, well, let's make a porn magazine for kids, but with music instead of sex. So the idea was to make just like big photos, and then this was back in the letter set days, when you rubbed letters on. It's way before computer. So everything would be like, this is essentially, if you look at this accept spread, this is what, awesome. This is like a porn mag art style, and then and you could write in, and there would be like a page or two with letters, and people would go like, yeah, I'm really into Venom, and it didn't matter that you would have Madonna there or whoever, George Michael, because this was your only source of cool stuff. And it was really image driven, so bands like Wasp and Kiss became really huge in Sweden because the magazine would be more likely to promote bands with cool photos.
That explains so much, because everyone in Sweden, like, just constantly, every time they reference something in music, it's Kiss. That's the one constant.
Yeah. No, yeah. And the guy who made this started out with another magazine called Poster, which was in the 70s. And Poster was like half of Poster magazine was Kiss photos. And a lot of original photos that were taken in Sweden, because Kiss were really popular in Sweden.
Yep.
So a lot of really, really, really cool Kiss photos that were not published anywhere else were published in Poster.
Wow, okay.
So this was one source. I mean, if you go through these old, I think I have like almost every OK from the 80s.
Jesus.
You can find, here's Brev Spalten. This is sort of where you wrote in and people would answer letters from the month before and stuff like that. Jon of Dissection wrote once, for instance.
Wow,
I never got one in there. He was probably like 12, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And he suggested they should one full magazine with only Venom. But it was just like, and then the back is really, to any Swede, the backside of every OK is legendary. And it looks like this. So it was a mail order service for albums.
Oh, man.
And there would be like a description of every album, some song titles, and then, at the bottom it will say, Irresistible Metal Fury, Grim Reaper, or Swedish Heavy Rock, and it'll be Saigon. And here we got Nasty Savage, very heavy metal.
See stuff like this.
I think everybody would agree that Nasty Savage is very heavy metal. So.
Yeah. And
this is also, you dream about having these albums.
Yeah. I think like that's what people are missing out on today. Like just the mystery of buying a record and then trying to get your money's worth of listening to it until it clicks. Exactly
that. Because you would buy an album and that would be a process, because you would maybe not buy it the first time you went to the store. You would come back, you would listen to several different albums. You knew sort of these 4 I'm interested in. Yep. I can afford one.
Yep.
And if you picked the wrong one, you didn't go home and cry. You listened to that fucking album until it was good. You learned to like that band. And I have a couple of those where I've sort of, made strange choices that have been sort of interesting over time.
Yeah.
One of them has a connection to someone you interviewed recently here, which was I was choosing between Under the Sign of the Black Mark, the Bathory, and Where Legend Began with English Dogs.
Wow.
And I picked English Dogs, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And for quite a while, I kicked myself because I thought Bathory were cooler. But then, in hindsight, I'm really happy to have that English Dogs album.
Yes.
So and I have bought Under the Sign later, so it's okay. And sometimes you just missed out. There was another thing in Sweden that was really important, especially if you lived out in the countryside. And that was a mail order service, not this one. Another one that was called Ginza, named after an area in Tokyo. And you ordered a catalog from them. I think you paid postage or something. And it was really big. I mean, the catalog was sort of like a magazine type thing. And it was just black and white and just lists. No, I don't think it had even pictures in it at all.
Right.
It was just lists by genre. And so you would get that, and they'd be cheaper than anyone else. And a lot of it would be like second rate, like Mexico press, whatever. It was in. They'd find cheap albums,
Yeah, yeah.
But so what we would do would be, you had maybe 5 friends.
Yep.
And you'd get together, and you'd all chip in like $2 each.
Yep.
And then you would cross off 10 albums that were only, like 99 cents, like the cheapest in the metal section.
Yeah, yeah.
Random.
Yep.
So then you would, wait a week or two, and then you would get 10 LPs that you didn't know shit about.
Yep.
But they were hard rock and had, and they probably had cool covers.
Uh-huh.
And then you would listen to them together.
Yep.
And none of them would usually be great, but I'll get to that. And then you would go, well, I'll take that one, You want that one? That one has a pretty cool cover and, that sort of thing. And you'd split them up. And if you like more than one or two, then you'd tape them off each other. But it was a way of sort of, it was a way of crowdsourcing record buys.
Yeah, yeah.
When you were like 10 and had no money. The funny thing is, several of the albums that we ordered and that nobody wanted are fucking legendary now and would cost you an arm and a leg.
Such as?
I have the first Sodom from there, Voivod Roar, Bathory's The Return, and they were all $1 because no one wanted it. It was just noise, you know. People thought it was completely unlistenable. So it's kind of funny that everyone fought to say, I'll take anything except that fucking album with the moon on it because it's terrible. I was like, I'll take Bathory, you know, it'll be fine.
That Roar record can stay with anyone else. That's, in my opinion, like that's there with Creator's Terrible Certainty as like a shit record amongst gems.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I fucking love it. I absolutely love early Voivod. I love later Voivod as well. So
Me too.
I one of those bands where I feel that whatever they get into, whatever they've done, especially at least, you know, with the original lineup, it's just been an interesting ride. And I like, you know, Clouds in My Head just as much as I like Build Your Weapons. So it's just different cogs of the same machine, I think. And I think that's interesting. Way more so than something like Celtic Frost, where I'm not going to put on Cold Lake. You know, it's just not my thing. But with Voivod, I feel that their sort of grungy rock stuff is really good. And it sounds like Voivod. It's just not the blower bass, face crazy stuff.
I mean, the spirit was always there, regardless of what they did. Which even now with
really, and it's a beautiful band, and it's a band that really makes me happy. And I never saw them with the full original lineup, but I have seen them with all the members at least.
Right.
Because I saw them without Snake when they had the other bass player vocalist, so Piggy was in there.
Yeah.
And then I saw them after Piggy's death with everyone else, and then I've seen them several times. But at least I've seen all the members live. So that's it's not good enough, but it's close enough.
It'll never be good enough for me, having seen them the first time at Maryland Death Fest. I think the year after you played was 2011.
Oh,
but it was a magic show. But I was just like, man, come on.
So to bring this sort of to where we're going,
so that takes you into tape trading essentially.
An article in OK. The magazine OK had an article about like the new wave of black metal.
Right.
And everyone my age in Sweden remembers this. It was a shock rock article about like 3 really dangerous bands that you should sort of stay away from, and here's the cool pictures, you know, that sort of thing. The funny thing is, the 3 examples of that they had were Venom, Merciful Fate, and Wasp. Because no one knew, and they looked the part, so it's fine, you know.
Yeah.
It was more the blood, I guess, than anything else. It didn't really matter. Also, I mean, the first big article in OK on Motley Crue were those photos that were taken for a porn mag around the first album, where they're wearing upside down crosses and skulls, and when they're sort of closer to Wasp in the image. Really cool photo shoot. Kind of weird that they have like fully nude girls there because it's made for a porn mag, but it's some really cool photos where they really look. They hadn't gone like overboard yet with the sort of pink scarves and stuff.
Yeah.
Back when they kind of dangerous, you know. And
yeah.
I think it's been a while since Vince Neil looked dangerous, you know, between the two of us.
Maybe to the buffet.
So I would just say that me and my closest friend, we were really into hard rock and traditional heavy metal.
Right.
And that's what we were listening to. And you knew there was other stuff out there, but like a lot of other people, or like a lot of other kids, it was just, you know, your comfort zone. So I listened to Kiss, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Ozzy, Accept, stuff like that. But apart from OK, there was also a radio show on national Swedish radio, like national broadcast radio, called Rockbox, with a guy called Per Fontander, another like legend to anyone who grew up in my time in Sweden. And he would have a 1, sometimes 2 hour show weekly, playing hard rock and metal. obviously he would do a lot of classic stuff, but he would squeeze in really cool stuff as well. I mean, he had Quorthorn there for a full long interview and played stuff from an upcoming album. He had Leif from Candlemass there before the first album came out, talking about it, playing songs. That's the first time I heard Solitude. He played Altar of Sacrifice before Raining Blood was released, and everyone taped it and was like, this is insane, you know.
What video went along with that, though?
Well, this was, the fall of '86, so it was an upcoming album, but no one had heard it yet in Sweden. Everyone was waiting for the next album.
Was it a radio show or was it a TV show?
What was that?
Was it a radio show or a TV show?
Yeah, it was a radio show. Yeah,
radio.
It was a radio show.
Got it. Okay.
It was a radio show. Yeah, so it was off the album, but it was still back in the day when you were sitting there waiting for new albums to come out. Mind you, kids, this was in the time when bands released an album a year at least. So.
Yes.
But he played a lot of cool stuff, and he was open to playing stuff that I'm sure he didn't like. I mean, he was an Aerosmith kind of guy, I'm sure, or like a rock guy.
Yeah.
But he understood his audience, and you would tape the whole episode, and then maybe 2 songs would be a little bit harder, and you'd get extra into those. He would also play demo stuff, so bands could send in their demos, which was really cool as well. So it was a really good exposure to different kinds of bands. So we were listening to a lot of that, and then what happened was, I don't know if that was as big in the US as it was in Europe, but in Europe, in sort of the first half, or in the mid-'80s, there was a really big wave of home computers. Stuff like the Commodore 64.
Right.
This was way before people had PCs at home, and sort of after the first wave of Atari and the video game consoles that sort of went bust in '83 when everything sort of crashed before Nintendo came in. So every kid my age, you'd be into music probably, Dungeons and Dragons, and computer games.
Yeah.
So I got hold of a guy who went to my school, and he had the same computer as I had, which of course meant, we could swap games, So let's hook up, swap some games, and see what happens. And that's one of the most important things that have ever happened to me. Because not only was he a great drummer, he was a really good drummer for being like, I don't know what he could have been, 14, something like that.
Yeah.
But he was already way past Iron Maiden. So when I came home to his place to just check out some computer games, he was like, yeah, you're going to hear this. You got to hear this. You got to hear this. You got to check out this fanzine, So he was listening to Metallica and Slayer, and he was most of all into like thrash.
Yeah.
Because this was probably 85.
Yeah.
Or maybe 86. And I borrowed 3 albums. Yeah, it has to be 86. Because I borrowed 3 albums that night, brought home with me. And that's a sensation I still can remember. I was in my room in our house. And I actually had a fucking fireplace in my room, which was really great when you're like dating chicks, But so I had a fire burning. I had my stereo, and I listened to those 3 albums that he had told me, yeah, you got to check these out. And they were Morbid Tales, Celtic Frost, Eternal Devastation, Destruction. Mm-hmm. So it must have been the spring of '86 because that came out then.
Yep.
And Hell Waits.
Wow.
So those, I was listening to those 3 albums, and it was just like, I think, putting it mildly, it was a revelation. It was just that feeling that I can never go back from this. Something just broke and it ain't gonna fix,
Yeah.
And all of you first thing you did was just tear down your Def Leppard posters, and it was just that sensation of, you were a kid too, so you got to remember that everything old was bad. Yep. If you found something new, cool, you had to get rid of the old stuff, which is incredibly silly when you're close to 50 and you look at it and you go, I can't believe I stopped listening to Kiss for like 5 years because I discovered Metallica. When did I do that? I liked Kiss. You know, it's just, but that was the way it was.
Yeah.
Had to get into it. And from that moment, everything was thrash and sort of proto death metal.
Yeah.
And so this was the spring of '86, and we started hanging together on a daily basis. Now this is once again the sort of Stranger Things feeling. So you would ride your bicycle to each other, and we would read Metal Forces, the fanzine, a bit of Kerrang and Metal Hammer as well, but Metal Forces was the really cool one, which was like a professional magazine, but with just Slayer and Metallica in Europe. And listening to albums, and then also my friend, who some might have guessed is Eric, who ended up being the drummer of Nirvana in 2002. He was also already a little bit into the demo scene, which I knew nothing about. I'd never, I didn't know what demos were probably. I'd heard demos mentioned on the radio show and bands would send in, but to have a demo with a cover and like a track listing and things, it was just like, wow, these are bands that don't have a record contract. Yeah, because you were a kid, you didn't know how things work. Yeah. So we were discovering mainly Swedish bands that were releasing demos in the sort of thrash vein, and we just then we found a fanzine, which I have right here. Let me see. Here we go. So this is really early '87, might even be late '86, because it's kind of funny that you would always. Nowadays, you would wish for everything to be a little bit earlier. Oh, I listened to Slayer before everyone else did, But back then, you wanted things to be new.
Yeah.
So if you're releasing a fanzine in late '88, you would write '89 on it because you didn't want it to age too fast.
Yeah.
So it's the new number. The new issue is it's brand new.
Right.
So this is probably early '87 or maybe even late '86. But this was called Heavy Rock. Mm-hmm. It's a real crap fanzine. But it was the first one I ever read.
Just the fact that you still have it is amazing.
Made by kind of a weird guy named Jörgen Sigfridsson, who lived in Uppsala, just north of Stockholm. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny because this has, for instance, a small mention of a band that none of us had ever heard about, right here. So it just says, in Los Angeles, this is the band people are talking about. Remember the name Guns N' Roses. This is going to be a big one. What are they playing? Glam, metal, rock? I don't know. It's a rock and roll band with an R&B bass. That's what it says.
That's actually a really good
selling out every venue in LA right now. Already having a pretty bad reputation. And then Ride to Stravinsky Brothers, Vanderbilt Lane, Redondo Beach, California, USA. So this guy, even though he was kind of weird, we got really inspired and we thought it was really cool. He made his own magazine, because I'd never seen a fanzine before,
Yeah.
And then he decided to put up some shows. And the first one we went to was in Uppsala, and this was the fall of '87. So I had just started what in Sweden would be like junior high. So that's the year I turned 13, I guess.
Yep.
And so he put on a show with two thrash bands, all Swedish, but two thrash bands, Damien and Agony. Damien put out a compilation a few years ago with their demos and stuff, and Agony actually released an album called The First Defiance. And then headlining was Candlemass. And this is one of the two first Candlemass shows ever. They never did shows for Epicus, so this was right when Nightfall was going to come out.
Right.
So Messiah was singing.
Yep.
And they were going to do two shows. They were doing Gothenburg and they were doing Uppsala. I think they did Gothenburg on a Friday and then Uppsala on the Saturday, where we went. So we went to see that. Interesting notes for like fact nerds is that if you watch the video for Bewitched, which is incredibly cheesy, it's the first music video made by. It's the very first music video made by Jonas Åkerlund.
Yeah, it is.
Jonas Åkerlund, one of the most famous music video directors of all time. He's worked with everyone.
Yep.
And who has also done
Lords of Chaos.
The Lords of Chaos movie, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, and played in Bathory, but no one knew back then. So, and if you look closely, Pelle Dead, which we'll talk about later, is one of the kids headbanging in the video. So, doing like the Doom dance. Yeah. Pelle is in the video.
Wow.
Along with a bunch of my friends, because I didn't live in Stockholm when I was 13 years old.
Yeah,
still, everyone, got to be in the video if they wanted to. The thing to look out for, though, is in the video, and this is really funny, but Lars, the solo guitar player of Candlemass, he broke his arm.
What?
They recorded the album, but he broke his arm, and they had to record a video.
Yeah.
So he actually has a cast in the video. It's just, it looks incredibly silly. He's playing a guitar solo with a cast on. But, what can you do? You're a small rock band. You've got one shot to make a video, and you do it.
Yeah.
But that meant when we went to the show in Uppsala, Lars couldn't play. I mean, he couldn't play at all. He's pretending to play in the video. So for that show, and the one in Gothenburg only, a guy named Mike Weed played.
Right.
Who's been playing with King Diamond and a bunch of other, tons of other bands. But he stepped in and played with Candlemass for that show.
Okay.
So for us, I was 13 years old, hitchhiked to Uppsala, which is about a 2.5 hour drive away.
Right.
Didn't have a place to stay. I think we ended up sleeping on someone's couch.
Right.
And then we saw Candlemass and 2 thrash bands, and we were, front center, banging our heads. And it was just absolutely amazing. I had seen shows before, but it was extremely low key.
Yeah.
It was a Christian heavy metal band in Sweden called Leviticus, released several albums, like more Christian than Trouble. Very Christian.
Wait.
The sort of rural area I grew up in had a lot of small churches. They got invited, so that's the first metal show I ever saw.
Maybe you can shed some light on this. Is Trouble Christian?
Yeah. You gotta ask Wagner about that.
Yeah, well,
The thing is, from a Christian standpoint, they were, because there was a Christian record store where I grew up that only had Christian music, and they had Trouble.
No way. This is fucking blowing my mind.
I actually bought Run to the Light there.
I always thought that it was a giant misconception.
Sure is. But they were perceived as Christian.
Right.
So all of these things got us hooked on the whole vibe that something was going on, something was brewing, and I think everyone, I'm not necessarily of my age, of any age, you come to a point where you're 13, 14, you realize there's a big fucking world out there, and things are going on, and I can't miss it, and if I miss just one party, it's going to be a disaster, because that might be the most important thing that ever happened in your life. And the thing is, you're probably right. It's going to be the most important thing that ever happened. So we were just working on... So we decided, let's do a fanzine. We started working on a fanzine. And we started going to shows. And I think one of the most legendary shows in Sweden, really one of those where you say... 800 people walked in and 8,000 people walked out because everyone says they were there, was Slayer's first show in Sweden, which was in Stockholm, 1988 Southern Heaven tour, with actually Candlemass opening. It's a fantastic show. It was absolutely amazing. I did miss the last Cliff Burton show, which was in Stockholm as well.
Yeah.
As most of you know, he died in Sweden on the way from the Stockholm show at night, where the bus crashed. There's even a memorial stone by the roadside now.
I can't wait to visit that.
But I missed that one, unfortunately. But there was just tons of cool things going on. So before we even had the band going, we decided to do a fanzine. And I think everyone then had to do something. You book shows, or you have a band, you do a fanzine, or maybe all three, whatever. So that's the first one that we did. Small format fanzine. And I'm kind of proud that, first of all, it's a good photo of Lars from Candlemass on the cover that I took. And I still have the negative. And the three bands mentioned on the cover that are all interviewed in the fanzine are Death, Bathory, and Candlemass in 1988. So that's kind of cool for like a 14-year-old kid living in the Swedish countryside.
That is super legit right there.
And it looks like absolute horseshit. It's a terrible scene, but then again, it's a fanzine from '88, so who the fuck cares? But the Bathory thing is really interesting. There's no photos whatsoever. It's just a long fucking text interview with Quorthorn.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that Boss, Quorthorn's father,
yep,
he sent me slides. He was really, he's gotten a bad rep over the years, but he was really friendly to a 14-year-old kid who had a fanzine.
Yeah.
He sent albums. He got me hooked up with Quorthorn, and he sent slides from the Blood, Fire, Death photo shoot in the forest.
Right.
I didn't know how to develop slides. How the fuck do you do that? I mean, every photo that we had in here was just like paper copies that we cut out and put in the Xerox machine. So I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So there are no Bathory photos in the interview.
Do you still have the slides?
The funny story is, there's a couple of sides to the story. One is, no, I don't have the fucking slides. I lost them over time.
Jesus.
Even more sad is that this interview with Quorthorn was made by mail, like a lot of stuff back then.
Right.
It wasn't made over the phone. So I wrote a letter with maybe 15, 20 questions.
Yep.
If you ever had a fanzine, you know that it's just one page with just a bunch of rows of questions. And I got back I think a 7 or 8 page letter from Quorthorn with detailed answers on every question, and really well, sort of formulated. And he talks about music and getting into classical music, and he mentions things I should listen to, and it's a really, really nice letter, obviously signed, and I don't have it anymore. And I have a lot of stuff saved, but I don't have Quorthorn's letter anymore. And that kills me. I've looked, I can tell you that my mom still lives in the house. So it's about 3 hours from Stockholm.
Yeah.
Hi, Mom. She's 82. So she's trying to stay safe from Corona. Thank God for Netflix, I can tell you.
Yeah.
She's got freezers and fridge full, and she's watching Netflix and staying away from it. But every time I go up there for the last 20 years, I go into the attic or wherever, and I dig through crates and thinking maybe one day I'll find the Quorthorn letter, but I know it's gone.
I think you'll find it. You'll find it.
But it was really cool, and the death story is kind of fun as well, because you got to remember, even a band like Metallica could get no press in '88. It was just it was just one of those. In Sweden, when Cliff Burton died, the local newspaper where I grew up had a really, really, really small notice that said one of the 11 members of the pop orchestra, the Metallicas, died in Sweden.
Jesus Christ.
That's true. I can probably find that news clip. But it was just, that kind of music was just so far out there. It's hard to imagine that Metallica was, but it's just like, people would say, it's a studio trick. You can't play that fast. This is fake. You can't play that fast. It's just, and then you play them Wehrmacht, like Shark Attack. And people would just go, "The fuck are you listening to? Crazy." So for a band like Death, they were just putting out Leprosy, and the only press they could possibly get was fanzines. Even though today you would consider them a big band in those days. Back then, no one cared. So I actually, from the Swedish distributor, I got Chuck's home number and I called him, and I was 14 years old, and we did a phone interview, and that's what ended up in the fanzine.
That's amazing.
So that was really, really cool. You would, I'm sure everyone has heard this story to death, but you would, tape trade, and you would write to people, and you would just connect, and slowly you would, find more and more people. And I found something really fun here as I was digging through my crates before this, and that's, I don't know if you can make this out, but this is part of a phone list, my old phone list from the 80s. So I've got a couple of names here. Here's Fred. So that's Fred Estby.
Fred.
You just had here. It's got Quorthorn's father's phone number.
The boss.
It's got here Cascade, which is the Cascade fanzine.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which obviously it says Cascade Tompa, which of course is Tomas Lindberg from Grotesque, and then later At the Gates. And it also says Grotesque Bullen, which is Necrolord.
Mm-hmm.
I got the phone number for Arg Records in Germany, who had Holy Moses and a bunch of other bands, Living Death. And at the bottom right here, it says Nihilist Nicke. Now, the funny thing is, most of these phone numbers, of course, none of them are mobile. They're landlines.
Yeah.
It's for people's parents, because everyone was like 15. Everyone lived at home. So these are the numbers for everyone's parents.
Yeah.
And you would call. Back in those days, a long-distance call was really expensive. So I remember that call to Chuck
would have cost a fortune.
I had a serious talk with my mom and dad before that, because I was 14 and I was I was a metal kid and I was already drinking beer, but I was still kind of responsible.
Yeah.
So I just said, we're doing the fanzine, working our asses off. I need to call the United States and do an interview. And it's going to cost, I think it was, by today's money, it was probably like $4 or $5 a minute. It was like, at that time, it was $2 a minute to call the U.S. And it's probably $4 if you recalculate the money. So that interview was probably $100 or $50 to $100, and for a small kid, that's a lot of money. So I made sure with my parents that it was okay that we did that.
Yeah.
And I had even procured one of those small microphones that you put on the headset of the phone, so that we could tape it.
I was going to say.
So you would, through the fanzine, you would get to know more and more people. Now, the first person I met in what would grow to become the Swedish death metal scene is kind of unexpected. And if you're into Entombed the Nihilist, you might know who this person is. And he was called Matthias. Matthias was, I would say, one of the really cool guys. He always seemed incredibly bitter, like angry. In a way that sort of impressed and scared me, who was a couple years younger. Matthias is listed on the first Nihilist demo as vocalist, but LG was singing. It says session vocals by LG. So he was only in the band for weeks or maybe a month or something like that. There are photos of him with the band. He's a really cool guy. I'm friends with him on Facebook now, and he has a very, very, very short history with Nihilist and Entombed, but it was a time when if you wrote something, that thing would end up on a demo and then in a fanzine and whatever. You couldn't just, like, change something on a website. If some info went out, that was the truth. That's what, was there. So I met him actually through, like, Dungeons and Dragons at a store in Stockholm that sold role-playing games. And he saw that I had a Candlemass shirt on, and that was one of the things. If you've ever seen that little clip on YouTube, Slayer! That's there's the truth to that. The fact that you could tell from someone's shirt if they were cool, or at least if they were into cool music, because no one would wear a Slayer shirt unless back then. It wasn't like Kim Kardashian would wear, back then, if you saw someone with a Slayer shirt, they goddamn well listen to Slayer.
Yes.
So, so he saw I had a Candlemass shirt from that show in Uppsala, and we started talking, and we met a couple of times. And that was the first person I knew in the scene, and he told me, I'm in a band called Nihilist. You should check us out. So that was the first person I actually knew from that, Buffla, Matthias. And then through the fanzine, I got in touch with Thomas in Gothenburg. It was probably the first person that I reached out to because I really liked the Cascade fanzine he had.
Right.
And it was everything that our fanzine was, and it was chaotic. It was just like stuff everywhere, artwork. And obviously Necrolord has done like 1 million record albums, covers now. He would sketch stuff, so it was, it was original artwork. And it was way we were capable of.
Yeah.
So we started hanging out or not hanging out, but by phone and writing letters to each other, and we just constantly talking to each other. And he would recommend albums and stuff. And the first time we met, he was going up to Stockholm. He was 2 years older, so he was 72, born in 72. So I was probably 14, and he was probably 16. So he was going up to Stockholm for a party, and I was going down to Stockholm with my parents. That's just what the world was like when you were a kid. You could always choose. So I was going down to Stockholm. I knew I couldn't go to get completely smashed at a party on New Year's Eve. But I could hook up with the guys during the day.
Yeah.
So New Year's Eve, me, Thomas, and Nicke Andersson from Nihilist hooked up at Heavy Sound, the record store.
That's a motley crew right there.
That's the motley crew story right there. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Oh, this one's a killer. When I first met Matthias, who was then vocalist in Nihilist, we were at that Dungeons and Dragons store, and he said, I'm going to go to a cool record store. You want to come with me? And I said, sure. And that was the first time I went to Heavy Sound.
Right.
The store where my brother was offering to sing in Heavy Low. So I went there, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I was going to buy a thrash album. And he said, no, get this one. And he got me to buy Troubles to Skull. And I'll thank him forever for that, because it's one of the best albums ever made.
Yep.
So that's how that shit went down. So we met at the record store, and I met Nicke, and he was really intense, and Thomas was lovable, as he's always been. And then they went to a party, and then I went and had like New Year's dinner with my parents. But that's the way life goes. Now I'm the parents. I can sort of, I can feel the angst in my own kids.
Yeah.
But then I'm the cool parent, right? So,
yeah.
No, not really. No, you're never the cool parent. So that's the first time we met, and I started getting a glimpse of something of a scene. But you got to remember, this was incredibly early. Obviously, there were bands around before. I mean, you had Bathory. But Bathory was never part of the scene. Bathory was a lone entity.
Yeah.
It was just never connected to what everything else was going on, which is part of what makes it so cool.
Yes.
And then you had Candlemass, and Candlemass was sort of the bastard child of bands like Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, they grew up in a northern suburb of Stockholm that was known for a youth center with a lot of music and rehearsal places, and that's where a lot of the classic Swedish hard rock bands came from, including Europe. And there was one band that were heavier and harder and less commercial than all the other ones, and that was Candlemass.
Yeah.
But they weren't part of the death metal scene at all. We saw them as old farts. You know, they were probably outrageously old, like 20. You know?
Yeah.
So I started to realize there's a bunch of teenagers like me here, and they're doing stuff, and they got bands, and we've got a fanzine on the way, you know. So everything just started cooking. You started calling people all the time. You started writing letters to everyone. And if I go through them, I mean, everyone that does something today was writing letters back then. So, hi Orvar. My name is Martin. Me and a friend have a fanzine. I'd really like your Disembodied Spirits demo. I want to write about it in your fanzine. Do you have a photo? Martin Larsson Eskilstuna, which of course is Martin from At the Gates.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So there's just like everyone was sitting in their little spots, writing and calling each other. And in the beginning, we were probably like 50 people, maybe 50 people having a band, and 100 extra affiliates that were just partying and listening to cool albums, you know. But it was so incredibly small. So in a way, it's a cliche, but obviously everyone knew everybody. And you would go to the same parties. And so I would hitchhike down to Stockholm, party over the weekend, and then hitchhike back. And it was just amazing as a teenager to have that sort of luxury to go to school, to have your life, play in a band and do your fanzine at home, but also sort of it's like getting away with the weekend. It was like difference, you know, banjo playing, you know. This was the weekend he didn't go golfing, you know. No, but so it was just so cool. And then shows started happening more frequently. So you would go to either Fagersta, which is a small town, but they had a concert venue that booked really cool stuff. So people from Stockholm and Gothenburg and everywhere else would go there. And you would have Sodom or Morbid Angel or Carcass and stuff like that.
Jesus Christ.
And then I would start hitchhiking down to Gothenburg. And that's quite a bit. That's like 5-6 hours, just a straight drive, a lot longer if you're hitchhiking. Yeah. So every summer I would go down and stay with Thomas. And he was still living, I'll have to get grotesque back in the day. And he was still living with his parents. So I would, you know, be a mattress in his room. His walls would be fucking plastered in cool fire and stuff. Because that's one of the things that I think everyone my age remembers, that you would write letters on the back of flyers. That's what, that was a thing, you know. So like this is a flyer, a concert flyer for Napalm Death, Filthy Christians, and Nihilist, among other bands that were going to play in Stockholm. and it has a letter on the backside from Nicke Andersson. So you would
Christ.
You would use the flyers to write on, and then it probably has it has pinholes here. You would put that on your wall. So you would collect flyers or copies of flyers. It didn't matter. I mean, it wasn't like collector's items. It was just cool stuff and cool art, you know. And then and that way you got a hold of more and more stuff. Here's a flyer for the very first. This is before the first album of Entombed shirts. It's a flyer for ordering some shirts that did.
Who did that art? Where's that art from?
Some sort of letter written on the backside. No, actually, this is from Sunlight. Let's get into that then. It's a perfect bridge here. Yes. This is the handwritten lyrics for Nirvana 2002 Snake, written probably like wild recording in Sunlight. So yeah, let's move into Sunlight. I think that would be excellent because that was such an important thing. We were starting out bands, and we you wanted to record, obviously, and you got to remember that this was back in the day where the closest you could get by yourself was a 4-track portable, like a Tascam or something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, there's some pretty fucking classic demos made like that, but
Absolutely.
Most of them sound like crap. So to go to a real studio would be amazing.
Yeah.
Now in Sweden, and this is in Daniel Ekeroth's book Swedish Death Metal, if you've read that one.
Yep.
In Sweden, there was something called Studiefrämjande. It was like an organization with government grants for people to get into just activities. So it could be pottery, it could be painting, it could be learning to speak Italian, or it could be playing death metal. You formed a small group that wanted to learn something, and then you got a little bit of government money. And if you did pottery, it would be to buy clay or stuff like that. So it was to encourage people to do stuff. And that became an incredibly important sort of small but important financing for bands, because if you had to be 5 people. So you had to pretend that someone played the kazoo or whatever, harmonic. But you had 5 members in a band. You could get a little bit of money every time that you practiced. And you could save that money up and pay for studio time. So if you had a small, like, teenage band, you could, after a year of rehearsal, go and record in a studio with, someone else paying for it, with a record company. So the place you really wanted to go would be Sunlight Studios. Now, if you're into Swedish death metal, you obviously know Sunlight Studios and Thomas Skogsberg, that completely set the tone and the sound for Swedish death metal. Now, I'm not sure, I can't remember now the absolute first, it's easy to check online, the absolute first band that recorded there. Treblinka were there, I think. Morbid second demo was there. Nihilists.
Wow.
Second demo. So, but it was a really, really small studio. Mm-hmm. It was like a demo studio. I'd say the floor, what could that have been? Like the recording room. Trying to think here. Maybe 15 by 15 feet or something. Maybe it was like crap. You couldn't be.
Yeah.
You could have a like 3 people at the same time. You couldn't be a full band.
Yeah.
I might even have. Yeah, I have maybe a small photo here. Let me see.
The only photo that I've ever seen of the original Sunlight was, I think, in liner notes for an At the Gates record. I was like, this is fucking primitive.
Yeah, I took a bunch of photos when we went there the first time. So I actually don't see the one from there's one from the recording room where we're setting up the drums, but I don't see it right here. But, well, more than anything, this is taken from behind the mixing desk. So that's Thomas Skogsberg right there, and that's Nicke Andersson in the paisley shirt, black hair.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that Nick with
see some cake sticking up. And here's me in the exact same spot with my Einstein and Nordbaum shirt on.
Yeah, you haven't aged a bit, man.
Back. Here is actually the recording room. That's me laying down vocals with headphones and Cederlund in an early dark film shirt, actually. If you can see that right there.
Wow.
And here is the mixing desk, which looked like that. No, I'm sitting right there. So,
that's amazing.
So the thing is, Thomas Skogsberg wasn't into metal at all. He wasn't a metal guy. No. He liked the Beatles.
Yeah.
But he was really, really good at sort of figuring out what can we do with this crazy shit these kids are playing. Because they're coming in, they're playing like 5 half tones down tuned. They've got distortion pedals that are sort of nuclear powered. They're playing fast as fuck and they're screaming their lungs out. What can we do that makes this sound as horrible as possible? Like really, really sort of conveys what they're trying to do. And if you listen to a lot of early death metal recordings, it sounds like shit because someone tried to make it intelligible. Yeah. Try to make it, well, I don't know what this is, I'll try to make it nice or whatever.
There was no roadmap.
Good. And I'm going to, obviously catch flack from this, but I can't fucking stand Morrisound. I think it sounds like shit, Scott Burns, sorry. But it's just too clean, and that's what I can't stand with most of the early American death metal stuff. I mean, I love like Necrophagia or Scream Bloody Gore or
Altars?
Autopsy. But Altars would have been better with a different. I mean, I think Thy Kingdom Come, it sounds immensely cooler than Altars does. Altars is okay, but when you start moving into like Leprosy or stuff like that, it's just
I hate
the albums are great, but the production is horrible. You got to Sunlight. It's the first time ever in a studio. Me and we had just started a band called Nirvana 2002. I might want to do a rewind on that and tell you how the band. But let's talk a little bit about Sunlight. So Sunlight had a 16-channel reel-to-reel. That's it. So you had 16 channels, and that was well enough back in the day. Mm-hmm. Later, Thomas would buy one more, so he had two 16 channels, 32 total, which I've learned afterwards is a lot better than a 32 from a sound perspective. But that's just. So I managed to find here. This is not Morning. This is from the second recording in February '91. But this is sort of what the channel report looked like. So you have drums, you have guitars, vocals, stuff like that. Just sort of like writing down making sure everyone knew what was on every track, and some notes that says, at 1 minute 20, there should be an echo on that screen. It's just some small stuff like that. And what is funny is I did find the receipt. So this is the receipt from the very, very first recording. This is when we recorded Morning with Nirvana 2002. This is the handwritten receipt from Sunlight. Wow. So 8.5 hours, 125 crowns. So that's about $12 an hour for a professional studio.
It's pretty amazing.
And then it was the real tape, a DAT, a digital audio tape for the full mix. So a total of $170 for a full day and recording a classic Swedish death metal song. But it's really fun to have stuff like this. That studio is long gone. Thomas has a Sunlight way out in the countryside now, but the actual place is gone.
Yeah.
And it had to do with it was in the basement of an apartment building in Stockholm.
Yeah.
And he just I think he had like a big room above the studio where bicycles were kept from the people living in a high-rise building. And then they cleared that out and made more apartments. And all of a sudden they were getting, there was noise coming in from the floor here, as people were laying down like heavy bass lines and playing metal. So he got asked to leave, and that was the end of it. But he was there for many years, and I mean, the early Helicopter stuff was done there as well. And it was a legendary studio, and tons of stuff has been recorded there. But I think we were one of the first 10 bands to record there from a death metal perspective, which is really cool and really fun. And it was just an experience. We went down to Stockholm. It was me, Eric, who played drums, and Lars, who played bass in Nirvana. And we had a couple of songs that we had recorded on a 4-track before that, that are on the Relapse compilation, or stuff that's, it's just been re-released on vinyl, I think. And we were going to record one of those songs. And then I think we were in the rehearsal room just a day or two before that and said, we're going to go down to Stockholm. We should have a new song.
Yeah.
So we actually we wrote morning the day before we went out to Stockholm, and then we recorded it because we wanted to have something new. So we did that, and I had a shitty guitar. So I talked to Uffe Cederlund of Entombed and asked if I could borrow his guitar. And so Morning was recorded with the same guitar, the same distortion pedal, the same amp as Left Hand Path.
Yeah.
And that's why it sounds like Left Hand Path. Only I think we have even more reverb on everything.
Yeah, you definitely do.
And that's one of the secrets of Sunlight, having the right gear. So I thought I'd show you some stuff.
Please do.
Just from that perspective. So I'm gonna
would love.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I would say the most legendary guitar would be this.
Yes. With the rail pickups.
Yeah, this is an Ibanez DT350.
Yep.
And this one is completely stock, but you should have EMG mics if you're going to do the real thing. If you're going to have a left-hand path, I think it's 85, and I have it written down somewhere. I can check for you if you want.
Yeah.
And this one is not set for down tuning. This is like a regular, and I haven't tuned it, so yeah. Well, whatever. Uffe Cederlund had one of these. It had a mortuary sticker on it. That's what I can remember. And just EMG mics, but a stock tremolo.
Yep.
And that's what was used on all of the early Entombed stuff. And I think that the story of the pedal has been told before. You know, they were trying all kinds of stuff to sort of realize what Lev Kusner had used on Only Shreds Remain, and then it turned out it was the fucking distortion pedal, and you know they were trying different amps and stuff, and that was the secret. But there's more to it than just the pedal, and I think everyone who's tried an HM2 realizes that sure, it sounds wicked as fuck.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily sound like Entombed only because you have the pedal.
Yeah.
So I would say one of these guitars does help. Later on, everyone would turn to Gibson, but for the early stuff, Uffe had this. The Dismember guys had the DT350 as well. I had a DT350 later, a red one, that I've unfortunately lost. That's why I bought this one. And then you would have, obviously, the header notes. Now, this one is kind of special. I don't know if the webcam can pick this up. This is actually the old in-house Sunlight one. So if we do that...
Oh, look at that. That's amazing.
So this is the one every band used that didn't have their own. This was the one that was in the studio.
Yeah.
So I bought this one up from Thomas a bunch of years ago. And there's a rumor that, you know, you should only play this with everything turned to the max. But Uffe Cederlund actually used to turn the last one, the one that actually has the distortion, down a little. Because otherwise you lose all the tone, and it's only like chainsaw. And you want to keep that fat tone in it as well. So you turn the distortion down a little bit. Now the trick to the left-hand path sound, there's been tons of misinformation on this. There was a period where I would just like once a week go out and change stuff on Wikipedia to make it right, and then I just fuck it, you know, let people spread their rumors best they want. I don't know what it says right now, but the original guitar sound for Left Hand Path with Entombed is based on 3 guitar tracks. Now you do have they're all with the DT350 with EMG mics. You give me just a second. That's 3 guitars. 2 are identical in settings. And he plays the same stuff, so it's basically a dub. But they're both pan completely left and right. So
let me just confirm this though. I think you once said that Uffe did both tracks.
Like, I'm going to get to that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you've got 2 identical sounding guitars playing the same stuff, pan left and right.
Right.
Then you have 1 guitar, same guitar used, with the boss distortion, which is right in the middle. Now, what is interesting about that is sort of the reference guitar that was used as Nicke Andersson was playing drums, because as with all of Nicke Andersson's stuff, the drums were recorded first, and then they would add on everything else. So the heavy metal sound is just too muddled.
Yeah.
So Nicke wanted a bit cleaner sound to make, for recording the drums. That one's in the middle and brings an edge to everything, and you can hear that. No, probably not. I probably can find it. But there's a spot in Left Hand Path where it goes. The guitar just turns gritty for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That's the guitar.
Yeah.
Turned out full, and you got it right in the beginning of Drowned as well. So, like 10, 15 seconds. So at 14 seconds, the track stops.
Right.
And then the guitar that kicks in is the middle guitar for like half a second.
Right.
And then the two HM2s come in. So it goes like...
Yeah.
There it is. So what happened with that is they just couldn't sync it properly. They recorded it with guitar and drums, and as they were adding on guitar, it was just like, it wasn't really working, and it was like, well, just turn up the original guitar that's locked in with the drums and everything, everything's fine. So you can actually hear that guitar a little bit in the tracks. As you were getting to, Uffe Cederlund played all rhythm guitars early into. Alex didn't play anything but his own solos. Right. And that is, well, I would say there's one more technical key to the Left Hand Path sound, and that is sunlight. And especially the mixing board for sunlight, which was, let me see, I have it right here, but I can check it for you. It was a really cool, it was just, it was probably shit. It was overheated. It was just cranking out really hot noise.
Yeah.
So I think, if you plug in your brand new BC Rich guitar with an HM2 into your sound card and record it on Cubase, sorry, it's not going to sound like that. There were so many different things weighing in on it, and that made the sound really hot. More than anything, it's Uffe Cederlund. That's just there. And Thomas Skogsberg told me once that every single band for the past 15 years that have come into Sunlight say, we want to sound like Entombed. And he says, great, you have Uffe Cederlund on guitar. Because Uffe Cederlund played like no one else. I've met incredible guitar players in my day. From a technical perspective, virtuoso guitar players. Uffe had something incredibly visceral about him. I've never met anyone, Uffe around that era, say 90 to 95, was just it was just amazing to watch him play. And like great players, he would just sort of adapt to everything. I remember once trying out his guitar, and it was completely out of tune. And he had just been playing, and he was like, yeah, but you can hear when it's off, and then you just bend that string a little bit more, And he was just like, and it was just like, and he was playing so hard, but still with full control. He is, Nicke wrote most of the songs, but for me, Entombed will always be Cederlund. And I think that the day that that combination went out the window, Nicke not writing the songs, Uffe not playing them, and I think it's really sad that the name keeps running around. And we'll get into that. I don't think that's a problem that's linked to Entombed AD. I think it's a problem linked to Entombed overall.
Yeah.
That I think that band was one of the best bands that have ever existed, and that band does not exist anymore.
Existed. Like, easily.
That's just the way it is. But so that's like the quick rundown. And what I used on Morning was the same guitar and the same pedal, and the same amp. So it sounds a lot like it, even though we obviously Uffe wasn't playing. So we recorded Morning, and that was done for a compilation that was going to come out called Projections of a Stained Mind, which was a sampler of Swedish, mainly death metal. That was done by Chicken Brain Records, which was actually the same person that the flyer that I showed you with Napalm Death was also Chicken Brain Records. So we were just happy to be on there. I mean, it was everyone that we looked up to, Grotesque, Entombed, Mayhem was on there, 2 tracks with Pelle, Freezing Moon, and can't remember. And I think I said sometime in some interview that if you're playing in a really obscure sort of scene underground, the best trick to be remembered is to be even more obscure than the next guy.
Right.
And that's where 2002 really came into the room, because we were the weird, strange band with the strangest name ever, and if we had done like 2 crappy albums of Nuclear Blast, no one would remember us.
Yeah.
But now we didn't. Now we're that band. Oh, you haven't heard them? Oh, yeah. Really? Oh, you really should get into this, And I think that really helped our legacy, so to speak.
Yeah.
What happened was, I don't think we can sort of avoid the name. We started the band. It was me and Eric from the start. And we had a youth worker at our school who was probably like 19 or 20. But he seemed like old, and he was ahead of another guy. And he had a 4-track. So we recorded some songs, and those tracks are on the Relapse compilation.
Yep.
And we first decided to call ourselves Prophet 2002, which is arguably a really strange name too. And the reason is there's an old synthesizer called Prophet, and one of the models are called Prophet 2002. I think, for instance, early John Carpenter stuff has Prophet synthesizer on them.
Right.
And we just thought it was a cool name. And we just thought it was weird and cool, and we wanted to be sort of weird. And then we changed that name, and we changed our name to Nirvana. And this was when we were right at the beginning, early on. And Nicke Andersson, I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, I don't know if it was Flipside or Maximum Rock and Roll, but it was one of the 2, like big punk magazines from the States. He said, I just got to do the new issue. There's a band from Seattle with your name on it. They just put up a 7-inch called Love Bus. I have no idea what it is, but And this was back in the day where you sort of claimed a name.
Yeah.
And if you found out someone else had it, shit, you can't use it because someone else has the name.
Yeah.
And then you realize when you're older that there's a million bands called the same thing because,
everyone
it's a big world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just the way it is. Fucking Tribulation, come on. It's a classic Swedish sort of thrash proto-death metal band called Tribulation, and then there's the current Tribulation. Who cares? It's fine.
Yeah.
My teenage son had a death metal band called Fester, and there's a band called Fester in Norway. And that's fine. Who cares? I'm not going to start a band called the Rolling Stones, but it's fine. But back then, that was important because, and this is sort of the point, they were just as small as us.
Yeah.
They had we had released a demo, they had released a 7-inch.
Yep.
But, I mean, we're really obscure small bands come sort of trying to make something happen.
Yeah.
So we were just like, well, we got to add something to that. Just like, Entombed AD or Teddy Bear Stockholm or whatever, when you add some small moniker. And then we said, well, we used to be called Prophet 2002. So we'll just, we'll be Nirvana 2002. And that was the birth of the strangest fucking death metal band name of all time. And by the time that we would technically have sort of reconsidered and changed our name, the band was already over. We never needed to sit down and think, oh, if we're going to release, an album, do a tour, and do this and that, well, maybe we should have another name. By that time, we were already gone.
Yeah.
So all we had was the rearview mirror, and we go, well, we had a kind of a strange name. And then everyone, 20 years later, when we released on Relapse, I think every second comment in the Blabbermouth thread was, Soundgarden 3003. And I'm like, but that's, if you grew up then you can sort of understand.
It's all about context, man.
Sort of, but it's still a fucking weird name, and I know it. But it's a fun story to tell. So
Absolutely.
That's basically.
That's amazing.
So by then we had a band. We had recorded one track in Sunlight, and we got offered to play a show. And this was in Stockholm, in it was a northern suburb in Stockholm, by a guy who he was just like this happy kid who wanted to like create shows. He had a small radio show on a local radio station. He had no fucking clue, but he wanted to make things happen. He set up a show in a really, really bad part of town. It would be like comparable to doing a death metal show in South Central LA back in the 80s or whatever. It was just like bad vibe.
Yeah.
But it was a show. So we looked at it and we said, we're going to play. We don't have that many songs. I had trouble playing guitar and singing at the same time, which I know I'm not the only one. So we decided not to. And that would have been our first gig. That was the first show that Entombed played after changing name from Nihilist. So it was the new band Entombed with David Blomqvist, guitarist from Dismember, on bass.
Yep.
And then Carnage played with Fred Estby, drums, and a bunch of other bands. I think Therion played, and just a bunch of young death metal bands. So we went down and we went to the show, but we didn't play. And that was the only time we were ever offered a show, because we were just weirdos that lived outside of Stockholm.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually play until much later. We only played reunion shows. We never played an actual show while we were still active. So
that's amazing.
What we did was work on more material, and then we recorded a full sort of like 3-song demo. And that was done in the summer of 1990. So Morning was in the spring, and then the demo, the full demo, was in a few months later. And that one was recorded at home. It was a guy who had opened a really small studio in our hometown. And we rewind this interview. You remember that it was a lot of Christians there. So it was a Christian studio for Christian music. Which I happen to know happened to Morbid Angel as well. One of the early Morbid Angel recordings was done in the studio where the guy freaked out because when they started singing the lyrics. This guy was cool though. He was fun, and he thought it was great fun, and we recorded. So we recorded the Disembodied Spirits demo.
All right.
And the studio was absolute horseshit. He didn't know how to use the equipment, and nothing really worked, and it sounded horrible. And so that was one of the things. I mean, I'm not much of a George Lucas kind of guy. I don't want to mess with old stuff and redo the effects for Star Wars kind of thing. But when we did the Relapse album, that was I was happy to be able to go through that material again and remix it properly, and it turned out a lot better. We included the original mix as well.
Yeah.
But that was the one, because that was like our main demo, the one thing that we did that had the most work put into it, and to sort of go through that again and make it sound better was actually really nice, and I'm happy I had the chance to do. But so we recorded that, and we got a logo made from Necrolord. The Nirvana 2000 logo.
So he made the logo.
By Necrolord, yeah. And I have the original somewhere here. I just couldn't find it right now. And then we took some photos. That same day, I mean, we were I think we were 2 or 3 days in the studio, and we went out at night. Well, actually, first in the day and then in the evening, and took a bunch of photos for that when we did that demo. And that's the classic sort of Nirvana photos of us standing in some fucking swamp. It's on the gatefold of the LP and everything else, and they were both color black and white. So there's that's the one where we're sort of hanging around and we were trying to be sort of different, or I was wearing a white shirt and a fucking vest.
I was going to say, like, that vest.
And it was just like, but that's the thing, you're 16 years old and you want to sort of stick out and be cool. And then you sort of, meet some chicks that says the Doors are the coolest band ever, and you go, yeah, because you want to make out. That's sort of the vibe it was. And I watched my daughter is spending the Easter with us right now, and she's 16, and she really wanted us to see a film that's one of her favorite films. So we watched Perks of a Wallflower. It's like a teenage film that is probably to her generation what Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off is to me. But I really liked it, and there was a lot of that sort of music stuff in there where you make mixtapes and you hear a song and no one knows what it is. And this is really cool song. We don't know what it is, and turns out it's Heroes with David Bowie. Right. So that sort of vibe where you just want to be. You just want to be cool. You just wish that some girl would see you and say, "Hey, you're cool. Let's make out." And you would go to shows and you would do all of this different stuff. Now, nothing really happened with Nirvana. I mean, we recorded some stuff, obviously some fanzines, and we got offered some 1 or 2 record contracts. But the thing is, back in like early 90s, if you were in a Swedish death metal band, I'd say you'd have to get up really early every morning and work really hard all day not to get a record contract. I mean, people were throwing them at you. Really? Because everyone wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Everyone could get a fucking record contract. And what happened was that everyone was since everyone was a king, people got stuck with horrible contracts for like 10 Unleashed albums or whatever, And I'm just really happy we didn't get stuck with something like that. And some of those bands are suffering still from really bad contracts and labels that own everything. And we just didn't care. We were going different directions. Eric was getting more into jazz drumming, and Lars just didn't really care. He was more of a hang-around. He was playing bass. And it's much, much later that now that Lars and Eric got... we can get into that later. But they've got a band now called Under the Church. So we were just playing, and I was going down to Stockholm, partying, doing whatever. And then came New Year's, 1990, and there was a party, and I wasn't there. I think I was at this must have been the 91 party. Well, there was a New Year's party for 1990, obviously.
Yep.
It was a party every chance you could. And Nicke Andersson, everyone got really, really drunk. Nicke Andersson got into his head that LG Petrov had hit on his girlfriend. Now, knowing Nicke, I'm sure he was very, very drunk. And quite possibly imagined it. Knowing LG, I'm pretty sure he did hit on her and couldn't care less. Because, I mean, we were fucking kids.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
So Uffe Cederlund calls me New Year's Day and says, shit hits the fan. Nicke just called me. He says, LG's out or I'm quitting Entombed. Or just LG's out. I don't think he even, it was Nicke's band, so he didn't care. I mean, he was just he just made the decision. LG is out. We need a new singer. We were recording a 12-inch in a couple of weeks, Crawl, and we've got a tour in April, a European tour over the Easter weekend, just like that, exactly that. So if you just said you want to do it, you want to step in and help us out on vocals. Because they really liked Disembodied. They liked the vocals on Disembodied Spirits.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, the hottest fucking band in the world.
Yeah.
In early '91 was Entombed.
Really?
I would have given my left and right arm to play with Entombed back then, even though they were friends. It was just,
Yeah.
So I obviously said yes immediately. And then started a really, really weird period for like 2 months. So what happened was, well, first of all, I didn't know how to say, well, wait a minute, can we do this or can we do that? So I was just happy to tag along.
Yeah.
And they had never done a music project with someone who wasn't, part of the band and, rehearsals and all, stuff like that. So the communication was really weird. They had a bunch of new songs and they sent tapes from rehearsals that were like extremely messy, just, like a tape recorder, super distorted from playing really loudly in the rehearsal room. And then a handwritten sheet of lyrics. That was it.
And you had
no idea where the vocals are going to go.
Yeah.
You had absolutely no idea. So a few weeks later, I go down to Stockholm, going to do this recording, and then you're in sunlight. It's all recorded already, and you start putting on vocals. And Nicke goes, no, that should be there, and this should go up, and then you should go down there, and then it's like okay. So I end up recording that entire 12-inch with Nicke standing right next to me, sort of pointing, do this, to this, to this, to that. And it was really stressful, and you wanted to do your best. And I will never, I like Crawl. I think it's one, the song. I don't like the rest of them. The other two are crap. But the song Crawl, I think, is really cool. I think it's a lot better than what ended up on Clandestine. But it wasn't a fun experience.
Yeah,
and
I can only imagine.
It wasn't supposed to be a fun experience. It was supposed to be a fucking recording. But I recorded that. We did a photo shoot, and it's kind of funny if you look at that photo. You'd have to look it up online. I don't have it right here. That I'm looking like this on the photo, and it's everyone in the band. And the idea for the photo was the first dancing cover, with the faces.
Right.
And it didn't turn out like that. It was supposed to be completely black, and then you could just see the faces.
Yep.
But it didn't work really. I guess the photographer wasn't good enough. But I had just, like a week before, started to get a little bit of facial hair.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm standing like this on the photo is that I have a little bit of sideburn. And we were all listening to dancing, and you thought it was really cool, and you wanted to look like a grown-up. And I'm still like 16 or something. So I'm trying to show off my sideburn, which is funny because then I became really well known in Sweden for my sideburns as I had a career as an older person in TV and stuff. I was well known for many years for my sideburns.
Right.
But that's the very first shot of my sideburns. So that was released right in time for Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on tour. And this was called Crawl in Germany. And this was April of 91 with Asphyx as opener. Asphyx had just released The Rack. So it was just the first thing they released. And that was fucking amazing, though. I mean, as I said, I was probably 16. I went on a 2-week European tour. We had our own nightliner. We were headlining.
Nightliner.
And it was just really, really cool. And obviously, we played a bunch of Left Hand Path stuff. We played a couple of new songs. We played Crawl, Chaos Breed, and Evelyn. So 3 new songs.
Amazing
and
songs.
Then, back in the day, you were always supposed to do a cover. So we did Evil Dead with Death.
Yeah.
And a couple of clips from that are out on YouTube. From that tour that are pretty okay, and I'm happy about it. And it was just really, really fun. It was great fun, and you felt like you were doing it for real. You were in a band and you were playing, and we're in Berlin this week, and we're going to be in Vienna. The Pungent Stench guys are coming along. It's just like. And then you met up with Atrocity and all of these different gore gods, and everyone was coming because Entombed were fucking hot. Yeah. Every local band were coming to the shows because they wanted to see Entombed. So we did that. We did that tour, and incidentally, I actually have no recollection of this from back in the day, but as I'm checking dates now, the day we came home. So the day after the last show was the day that Pelle, Ohlin, killed himself.
Ooh.
It's exactly at the same time.
Ooh.
We're coming home from the Crawl tour the day he commits suicide in Norway.
Yeah.
So this was going on because I'm sure we're gonna get into the black metal thing.
Yeah.
This was going on while we were hot as shit.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, part of it. Depends on who you talk to in Norway, whether they're going to admit it or not. But, of course, there was envy involved.
Of course.
We were kids, and Sweden was doing well. And had yet to sell out, which I think happened later on.
Yep.
But I mean, the spring of 91, Swedish death metal was really hot. Norwegian death metal was not. So, obviously, there was resentment. But... I got home, had done the full tour, and then we had a couple of more things going on. We did, I think, 2 or 3 shows in Sweden. One with a really tiny upcoming band on the West Coast called Dissection opening. And Jon had that I'd met before, had set up the gig. Right. He had a small fanzine. Right here, called Megaman. This is Jon Nodtveidt's.
I've never seen an actual one of those. I've only ever heard of it.
There we go. And then we also did a big festival in Berlin, which was really cool. That was probably the last thing I really did of that era. It was a 2-day festival in Berlin, outdoors at a big sort of Greek theater, and it was a punk day and a metal day. And I think, Napalm Death played the punk day, even though they were sort of leaning towards death metal already. They didn't want to play the same day as Morbid Angel because they hated each other's guts. So at least that's what we were told. So I think the metal day had Morbid Angel, Gwar, Entombed, I think Morgoth played, Candlemass, all kinds of stuff. And then the punk day had all kinds, I think, for instance, Bad Religion, Napalm Death, bunch of hardcore stuff. It was a really cool 2-day festival. So I think we flew down, which was luxury back then. And we didn't bring any backline at all. We said, fuck it, let's go down and party. They brought guitars, but I was doing vocals, so it didn't really matter. And they've gotten us hotel rooms next to this Greek theater, sort of outskirts of Berlin. But we had been to Berlin just like 2 months earlier on the tour, and we played this really cool rock venue that's, it's been gone for 30 years, but that was called Ecstasy. It was like 3 floors, a concert venue, and like rock bars and like a dance floor or whatever, but it was really cool. And we knew it was an apartment behind the bar.
Right.
Because we stayed, that was like the backstage room when we played it. And we said, fuck the hotel. We want to borrow the apartment behind the bar.
Yeah.
So we just, we stayed there and we played the festival and we partied for like 3 days and had great fucking fun. And looking back, I'm not going to say, I got out of it unscathed, but I managed to do like European tours and big festivals when I was 16, had great fucking fun, and I didn't have to go through the terrible tours, getting ripped off by record companies and slaving to play some songs in some shithole in venue in Pittsburgh or whatever. So like I got to do the fun and cool stuff, and then I was out.
Yeah.
Then it was done.
Clean.
I moved from Sweden. I just said, Nirvana was gone. I was out of Entombed. That was kind of a bummer, but not because I was out. I wasn't good enough to sing Entombed. I'm going to say this for the record once and for all. LG Petrov is the vocalist of Entombed. I know people keep assuming that there's bad blood between us. And I think there's been. I think he was really, really resentful after getting fired. I would have been too.
Yeah.
He was in the hottest band in the world and got kicked out.
Yeah.
And some fucking kid stepped in,
Yeah.
We knew each other, but still. And once in a while there has been some bad mouthing.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, no one on this world would be happier if the original lineup of Entombed got together and played and LG did vocals.
Yeah.
And it's a no-brainer for me because that's the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, with that said, I was out of Entombed. I was told by Uffe that I didn't cut it. And I think in a way it was partly being too young.
Yeah.
I still had like 2 years left of school.
Yeah.
And they had a problem already with Alex. Alex was just a year older than me. So I was 16, he was 17. They had to say no to tours because he was still in school.
Yeah.
And so to bring in someone who's even younger is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that well. I didn't sing that well. So what pissed me off was the whole Johnny situation. Not Johnny at all. He's a wonderful guy, and I'm really, really happy that I got to know him back in the day. I loved Carnage. Mm-hmm. But what happened was, Entombed were already recording Clandestine.
Yeah.
And as a very close friend of the band, and especially a close friend of Uffe, I knew that. I'd been into Sunlight. I had heard the sort of pre-production tapes.
Yeah.
So as they were looking for vocalists, they were advertising under a false name. They didn't say it was Entombed, but in major morning newspapers in Sweden, there were ads saying like professionally, band with record contract. I think it said they didn't want it to be completely clear that it was a death metal band.
Right.
But they didn't want someone who had never heard of death metal. So I think the ad said, inspired by Black Sabbath, Motorhead, and Repulsion. Which is kind of weeding out everyone who doesn't know who Repulsion are. But still, they didn't want to write, like Autopsy, Repulsion, Morbid and Mayhem, that kind of thing. So they were looking for a vocalist, but they didn't have time. They needed to get the record going. So they were recording clandestine, and to avoid the mistakes that were done when we were recording Crawl, Nicke recorded vocals for the entire album as a placeholder for the new vocalist to be able to hear exactly how the vocals are going to be.
Yep.
Now, when I got clandestine, and it was released to much, woo-ha. It took like 10 seconds, and this is Nicke's vocals.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a tape that was like 2 months before Johnny came in the band.
Yeah.
From somebody that said with like pre-recorded Nicke vocals, and that's what ended up on the CD. So I knew that this is not the new vocalist. Now everyone goes, "This is the new vocalist for Entombed. This is fucking awesome. This is really cool." And I'm the guy who would just, out of the band, and I was like, "No, it's not." But I didn't say anything, obviously, because I was a close friend of the band. I didn't want to, fuck with it. But I knew that Nicke did the vocals. It was very, very obvious. Now, the only portion, I think everyone knows this by now, but the only line that Johnny sings on the entire album is, I think it's Blessed Be, or Sinners Bleed, where he goes, "I just want to die."
Yeah.
That's Johnny.
Okay.
I just want to die. Johnny was a great friend, and this is also what you can you can sense sort of the team vibe that was going on, which was, he's a cool and great friend and he's great to party with. Let's make him our new vocalist.
Yeah.
That might not be the best choice when you have a recording band with a record contract and you've got tours lined up with Morbid Angel in the US. To set someone and then go to the studio and you go, it doesn't work, well, he's going to learn along the way.
Yeah.
No. As Nicke once put it, I think it's in Donnie Nickeroth's book, we shouldn't have done that, and frankly, we shouldn't have fired Elgin. So, yeah, of course. But the thing is, that era really broke Entombed in Sweden. I mean, it really brought them to the mainstream attention. So, up till then, no one had really heard about death metal. It was extremely underground in Sweden.
Yeah.
But mainly through efforts from House of Kicks, who are now called Sound Pollution, record store and now label in Stockholm, who also did all the promotion early for Helicopters and Ghost and all kinds of bands. They managed to get Entombed into the to the headlines. So there were two things that happened. Clandestine wasn't yet released, I think, but it was on the way, and they played the biggest rock festival in Sweden. And every music journalist in Sweden saw that show and said, "What the fuck is this?" Because it was intense, and you had a completely packed crowd and stage diving and people just going crazy. And I mean, it was, if you had no idea, if you were coming to hear Bruce Springsteen and you saw Entombed in 91, you got your ass kicked.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you had stuff like this. This is like the biggest tabloid in Sweden, Expressen. You had like full page articles on the underground stepping out into the light. This is the new face of Swedish music, and they're already booked for a tour in the US, and the unknown. Sweden has Roxette, but they also have Entombed. 5 teenage guys on their way to a big US tour. So I mean, all of a sudden they were the talk of the town, and they did all kinds of like promotion.
I think that's a good thing.
That's where things started to go bad, because all of a sudden they agreed to do all kinds of things and videos and promotions that were kind of silly.
But would you say, in that regard, would you say that... Because I don't think people realize this as much as what's being unearthed right now, even though it's in print and it's in like all, blogs and metal archives and everything. They were literally teenagers, and if you think back to where you were as a teenager, for most people listening to this right now, you probably couldn't even get by in life properly. Yet these guys have recording contracts. They have dig deep person fucking breathing down their neck.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that makes you sort of stop and think is the fact that no one in Entombed signed the record contract with Eric.
What?
For Left Hand Path. Because they were minors. Their parents signed it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because everyone was under 18.
Right.
It tells you something about... if you look at band decisions and, we shouldn't have kicked LG out of the band, or maybe we should have done this, or maybe that cover isn't that great. These are fucking children.
Yeah.
And I say that in the best way. I think, teenagers do most of the best stuff around, but when it comes to responsible decisions, maybe 16 isn't the best.
No.
So that's something that you've got to realize. And obviously there's other forms of music where people are incredibly young. If you look at the early rap scene in LA and stuff like that, and people are really young and make even more stupid decisions. But I think that the Lords of Chaos movie was crap. I didn't like it. But I think one thing that came across in it that I did like was the fact that these were a bunch of fucked up kids.
Yep.
And I think that, I've been in conversations in YouTube commentaries on stuff on Pelle, Ohlin and stuff like that, where you have some 25-year-old hardcore black metal fan from Brazil going, he was the most evil person alive, and he ate children and he sacrificed goats to Satan. And you go no, he was a fucked up kid who needed professional help. And I'm really, really sad that he didn't, because he died. He fucking died.
Yeah.
Because of emotional problems.
Yeah.
He didn't die because he was too evil to live. He died because he needed help.
Yeah.
And I'm close to 50 now, and my oldest son is 24. Mm-hmm. I have a teenage daughter, and I just had a baby who's not even a year yet. But more than anything, I'm a parent, and that's a fine line, because obviously, I had a talk yesterday about a friend from that time who was like, my teenage son he's getting into cool music, but the lyrics he's writing, I'm getting kind of worried. And you're like, I know, and you're just the same. But it's different when if you're 47 and your 14-year-old is writing lyrics about raping and mutilating girls. It's all of a sudden you go what am I gonna do about this? And you realize that you're the one who's been giving them autopsy albums, And it's all in good fun, but there's a point where it's not, and you just sort of say, how do I deal with this without becoming dear happy?
Yeah.
So I think I've always been able to walk that balance, but I can see the problem.
Yeah.
Especially if you sense that, my kid can't really, walk this balance, You've got to sort of think, what are we going to do here? Can we somehow turn him on to Duran Duran instead? I think it's a bit too late for that. But so that's an important thing you bring up. These were kids. I'd say when you're 15, someone who's 17 is a lot older than you, and someone who's 25 is an old fart. You got to remember that. And I think everyone has felt that, but you tend to forget it when you get older. There's an interview with me, might even be here. There's an interview with me in a regular newspaper from around the Entombed days. Where did that one go? I think I had it here. Here. And the photo is missing. There's actually a really good photo of me. But Orvar walks the heavy path. This is from the local newspaper. And they ask if, you were on a European tour recently. Was that all sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Because it's kind of obvious that, probably a music journalist who's 30 was going to ask that, But I was 16 or something like that, 17. So my answer is there's a lot of rock and roll, but very little of the other stuff. Our tour manager had never seen as few girls in a tour bus. But you got to remember, we're 16. We're not, 25-year-old rock and rollers with a heart on. I mean, it was just like you thought Morbid Angel. I thought Morbid Angel were like 70.
Yeah.
They were. I mean, the bands who were older than us were so fucking old.
Yeah.
And then you realize when you look at it, I mean, Cliff Burton was the same age as my son when he died. It just, but you sort of felt that these guys, if you were about 20, you were really old. Really old. There's a line from Rumblefish, the film with Mickey Rourke, where his little brother, played by Matt Dillon, they're talking about his brother, and they go, "He looks so old." He says, "He is pretty old. He is 18." And they go, "No, but he looks really old, like 20." And I can remember that feeling, and it just sort of dawns on you when you get older that a lot of that seeped into what you did. It was you against the world, and you were really, really sort of not listening to anyone and just doing things on a whim.
Yep.
And always, as I mentioned before, about putting the wrong year on a fanzine because you wanted to look new. Stuff like that happened all the time. You were doing things at the spur of the moment. Oh, maybe this would be cool, and you didn't think it through. So if you had heard Nocturnus and you were recording your only studio recording the next day, you're going to put synthesizers on there because it's really cool. And Nocturnus did that, and I heard that yesterday. Instead of going, okay, is this our thing? I don't know. But it's cool, let's do it, So that's why there's synthesizers on Disembodied Spirits, because we had just heard Nocturnus.
Right.
And if it was recorded a week before or a week after, there wouldn't have been synthesizers on there, but we thought it was really cool, so we wanted to put something good. Weird.
That's insane. So teenagers on tour.
Teenagers on tour.
We touched on Pelle. What the fuck happens through 91 through 93, 94 with Norway?
Yeah, what happened with everything?
What the fuck happened?
To me, basically, I just got out of it. Not like, I need to go to rehab. I just decided to move to the States.
Right.
I got out of Entombed. We did record 2 more songs with Nirvana. Called Snake and Further Beyond, and then we called it quits. I think we were almost broken up as a band when we did those 2 songs. I think we laid down the main tracks, and then I stayed and did all the guitars and solos and vocals alone because, it wasn't really a band anymore.
Yeah.
And then I just said to myself, we had mandatory military service in Sweden back in the day.
Oh.
And I didn't want to do that, of course.
Yep.
So I figured, as soon as I get out of school, I'll go to the U.S. Because that was the thing back then. I don't know, it might still be. But back then, it was like, everyone wanted to go to L.A.
Yeah.
Just seemed like the cool place to be. So I went to L.A. I guess this is summer of '92. The day I got out of school. And I had saved up enough money for the plane ticket And I had $500 with it. That was it. So I bought a really cool old Ford, a huge fucking Ford station wagon.
Jesus Christ.
And I really wish I still had. The biggest station wagon Ford has ever produced. It was massive. And that cost me $300. I had $200 left. I had a couch I could stay on. And then I just went out and started looking for jobs. And I found a job at a record store. So I started at a record store down in Santa Monica.
Yep.
And then gradually moved up to they had 2 locations. So I moved out to the UCLA area.
Yep.
And in Westwood, in LA.
Yep.
And this was a fantastic time to work in a record store. CDs were the thing, obviously.
Yep.
But LPs were still around, but no one wanted them. So we would get just like crates of LPs coming in, and we would sell them at $1 a piece because no one wanted them. And you could just pick out everything you wanted because no one cared. Vinyl record was worth less than the paper the cover was printed on.
Yeah.
No one wanted. So even though, I couldn't bring that much home with me years later when I moved back, I still got a lot of cool stuff back then. And it's fun to still have the price tags on there where you go like, yeah, this is Venom's Black Metal for 99 cents, or this is Celtic Frost Emperor's Return for 49 cents or 48 cents. Or whatever.
Jesus Christ.
But it was a cool era, and this was around the time that things were going on internationally. First of all, you had the whole emergence of, you had the sort of backwater of grunge still going on. I think Nevermind hit in the fall of '91. That's something to remember, that grunge and Swedish death metal hit at the same time.
Yeah.
Clandestine came out about the same time as Nevermind did, and that's when it all got, took off.
Yeah.
And the Swedish death metal crowd, or at least my part of the Swedish death metal crowd, Nicke and Uffe, were really into the early sub pop stuff.
Yeah.
Uffe was listening to Swans, Fudge Tunnel, stuff like that, but everyone was into this band called Nirvana, who done one album called Bleach. And I remember calling Nicke Andersson. I was at my girlfriend's place in Stockholm. This is '91, and I see Smells Like Teen Spirit on TV. And I call Nicke Andersson and I go, turn on your TV. Nirvana is on MTV. Which was outrageous. The smallest, fucking, weirdest, hardest, strangest noise indie rock band we knew. Daytime on MTV. It wasn't like 120 minutes or anything.
Yeah.
And then like half an hour later, video comes on again. Then you realize something's going on. Someone has decided to put $1 million into this.
Yeah.
And by the end of the day, it had played 5 times. But that was like the day that it broke. The day that someone decided, okay, we're going to make this the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
And it worked. But I remember that so clearly. No, but so I moved to LA. I was working in a record store, and I was picking up cool albums. And I didn't really know anyone in LA in the music scene. But I did bump into people once in a while. There's some fun stories. For instance, this guy comes in, he's on a date. And I seem to remember he was wearing a suit. He says he wasn't, but who cares? But this guy, proper looking guy, comes in and he says, "Oh, you have a metal or like an underground section?" And I go, "No, not really, but tell me what you're looking for. I might be able to help you." And he goes, "Is this band called Repulsion?" And I go, yeah, I'm very familiar with Repulsion. Oh, really? Well, my name is Matt. I used to play with Repulsion, and I'm on a date here, and I don't have the album anymore, so I wanted to show her the album. And I've teased Matt about that several times, because he was, he wanted to impress on this girl, and he wanted to show that he was on an album.
He would be mortified. I can just see his face right now.
Hello, Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Matt. I can't wait to do a video.
And then there were plenty of other, things like that where someone would just, walk into the store and you'd talk and you'd realize that someone had been in a band a long time ago and stuff like that. But the stuff I remember most vividly from that era is sort of the emergence of the industrial stuff, like 9 Inch Nails coming up, and the sort of vibe that was going on around that. It was the same era that National Killers came out, and it was sort of a convergence of movies and music where everything was really intense. You don't feel that right now. It's not like you would care if a new cool movie came out and someone had done the soundtrack for it. Yeah, sure, but back then, everyone was sort of waiting for the next cool film to come out. Tarantino was just coming out, and it was just like, it was an interesting time to be in a record store because everyone was really into music. It wasn't just background noise on Spotify. It was buying albums still, even if you were into the mainstream. Yeah. So I was living there, and once in a while, bands would come over from Sweden. And this is still before email, so you would call people once in a while, talk a little bit, maybe even write a letter, and once in a while we'd get packages from Sweden, where, say, Uffe would send some new Entombed releases, maybe a t-shirt, something like that, and I would just, go see my friends when they came over on tour, and so when Wolverine Blues came out with Entombed, it was, had a very different sound, and I think it was very right for the time. It's an Entombed album I don't listen to a lot anymore, and I think that's partly because I feel it's very stuck in the time that it did come out. But they were going to do a U.S. tour for that, and Uffe asked me if I wanted to be guitar tech on that. And I said, sure, and I got, 2 months off from work. And that's weird because it was a time where people were sort of hoping that Entombed, or even death metal in general, was going to break. And it's always hard to know what horse to bet on.
Yeah.
So Entombed were sort of frog leaping between different record companies, and they were in Colombia, and they did that god-awful video with Wolverine, like the comic book character, and that was, Colombia were like, yeah, this is really hot, and comic books are really big with the kids, and it's just like, this is so not what Entombed is about.
Yeah.
And we did a tour, and the tour was really, in a way, really cool. It was Entombed headlining, and then you had Unsane from New York, sort of punk, three-piece, whatever you want to call it, sludgy, extremely hard, sort of Uffe Cederlund music, opening, and then the other opening act was Obsessed.
Obsessed. Okay, all right.
So this was right. It was Colombia, So this was right when Obsessed had done The Church Within, just when they were.
That's that era, right? Like, everyone's signed to the major label. Yeah.
So we did the tour, and it was. The idea was great. We had 3 very different bands, all very interesting. Problem is, Entombed kids fucking hated everyone else. They hated that punk 3-piece. They hated the fucking hippies. The Unsane fans were punk, hardcore people. They're not going to go to an Entombed show.
Yeah.
And Obsessed didn't really have any fans.
Yeah.
Back then. They were practically unknown.
Yeah.
So it was just 3 different bands tugging the tour in different directions. Kind of like being, drawn and quartered.
Yeah.
And then you had a lot of drug problems. Several of the bands had serious addiction problems, and add to that, Uffe Cederlund had very, very severe alcoholic problems at the time. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say this unless he had talked about it himself.
Yeah.
So half of my job would be babysitting him, making sure he didn't hurt himself or not really hurt anyone else, but he would just lose it.
Yeah.
Get that sort of Quint, the fisherman in Jaws, talks about when a shark bites, and that the eyes roll over white, and when they attack, and I can get that same sort of feeling from some, friends who completely lose it when they drink, and the eyes just go black.
Yeah.
And that person's not in there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's not fun to deal with when you're 50, but when you're 20 and you're drunk yourself and you're having a good time, and that happens so quickly, and all of a sudden someone is, smashing a bottle at the bar, cutting himself in the face or whatever. I'm not saying he did that then, but that's sort of the vibe that's incredibly self-destructive. So we ended up with at the end of the tour, getting closer to the end of the tour, Nicke Andersson said, "If Uffe drinks one more drop this tour, I quit the band. I go home." So my job became to make sure that Uffe was completely sober.
Jesus Christ.
And things just went the way they went. We did some very strange shows. Some shows were really, really, really good. Hello to everyone who saw the Wolverine Blues tour in the US. We did meet several people from Repulsion on that tour. Scott was living in Canada at the time, and he came to one show. And I think Dave might even have showed up. But Aaron came to a Detroit show. And we also played a festival gig, like a one-day indoor festival at the Palladium in LA with Pantera.
Wow. Jesus.
It was Pantera, SOD, Entombed, and something else. And I think Tom Araya was sort of like presenting the bands. It was for Rip magazine, which was like a metal magazine back in the 90s. Yeah. And everyone who was anything was there. I remember Blackie Lawless was there, and he was wearing a lot of makeup. Almost like Kate Liberace makeup, like brown.
Like he was already trying to hide aging or something?
Yeah, and he was wearing like a suede jacket and stuff. And we were really drunk, and we went up to him and we said, "Hey man, I really love the first Wasp album." And he was like, "Yeah, go fuck yourself." Kind of. But that's the thing you don't want to hear, when you're 40 and kids come up and say, "I love the stuff you did when you were 25."
Yeah.
I once bumped into James Caan in a bar in LA, and I said, "Hey man, I loved you in Rollerball," and he was just like, "Yeah, thanks." I only did like Godfather and Mystery.
Yeah.
But you always try to sort of pick on people in a way. But so we did that tour, and in the end, we just ended up. I think the last thing we did was in fucking New Jersey, the armpit of the world, and we played a show there. And then Entombed had a manager back then who was such a fucking dick. He was a loser and a dick, and he was a terrible manager for the band.
Yep.
And it wasn't his job to take care of a lowly guitar tech like me. I can understand that, but he was terrible for the band as well. He got thrown out as manager. It was really funny. He was a terrible manager, and he was sensing that they were going to fire him. So he came to them with a contract and said, "Oh, by the way, I want to renegotiate a contract, So that if we part ways, you still need to pay me percentage for sort of the rest of your lives. And they were just like, go fuck yourself, Frank. So we ended up in New Jersey, did the last show, and then Frank said, well, I'm not going to pay for your trip home. And I hadn't made any money on the tour. I got paid outs, like $15 a day for food.
Yeah.
I was just happy to tag along. Now I was in New Jersey. I was 20 years old. I didn't have any money, and it was like, you got to go home by yourself. Thanks a lot, Frank. So I ended up going down to the bus station. I managed to scrape enough money to catch a Greyhound bus from fucking New Jersey to LA. It took almost 3 days.
That's a Dave Mustaine truth right there.
It's fun now because you can tell this when someone gets nostalgic and says, "Oh, I wish I'd done a Greyhound coast to coast," and you go, "Oh, no, really?" It's like one step above Goulon. It's just you'd be on a bus. Everyone was smelling terribly, and it was not even real toilets in the bus. This was in the 90s. It was like a cracker in the back, and the only people going coast to coast on Greyhound were the people who absolutely couldn't afford anything else.
Yeah.
So it would be like homeless people. It would be like psychotic veterans from the first Iraqi war, who would have breakdown in the middle of the night, screaming, shell shock, and several really young moms with a baby and a black guy who were fleeing from their abusive boyfriends.
Yeah.
And that's the coast to coast story. And I ended back in LA. And then I did I stayed a little bit longer, and I decided to move back in 96. Now, right before that, I forgot to tell you about that. At the Gates and Dissection came over. And they were opening for Morbid Angel. So those three bands were on tour.
Right.
And I tagged along for 4 days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that was interesting. This was right around the time that Store of the Lights Pain had come out and Store of the Soul.
Yeah.
These were two bands in their prime.
Yep.
And they were opening for Morbid Angel. So obviously a good crowd. And I knew Thomas very well, and we'd spent a lot of time together when we were teenagers. But I knew John, or Jon actually. His name is Jon, which I think is closer to Jonas than to John. Actually. But yeah. So Jon and I had met several times. He was always the tiny little fucking kid. I think he was a year younger than me, but he looked like he was 10. He was just so small when we were 14, 15, But this time he'd grown into a man. He was 20. And he was intense, but he was also great. We got along really, really great. This was the classic Sword and Lights lineup. With Ohlin on drums and everyone else was in there, and so we just hung out for 4 days. I went with them on several concerts, and we just talked, and we would talk albums, we'd talk Darkness Descends and Pleasure to Kill, and we'd talk influences and everything, and we just hit it off really well. And it's one of those times in life that I've felt, wow, I really made a new friend here, even though I've met the person before. We really hit it off.
Yeah.
So they went back, and we wrote some letters to each other and stayed in contact. And then I decided that I was going to move back to Sweden. And I said, we should get in touch and see what happens. And then that just didn't happen, and all of a sudden, I hear, Jon's been arrested for murder. The fuck is going on here? And then all of that unraveled.
Yeah.
And his lengthy prison sentence and everything that happened. And that was a big thing in Sweden. I mean, it was, not only was it a murder, and I mean, we do have murders in Sweden, but it was, I mean, the way it was, obviously it was tabloid city. I mean,
yeah.
Black metal kids murders a gay man in a park. Of course,
yeah.
You know, they're going to do it about it. And it became a TV special with like some actors with wigs on playing the band and stuff like that. I mean, it obviously, you know, it was great news. But what I really haven't told anyone is that we didn't have any contact while he was in jail. None whatsoever. But I actually met Jon the day he got out of prison. And we talked for 1 or 2 hours. And about everything. About the crime. About doing the time. About music. About everything. And by then I was a celebrity in Sweden. I had I had a TV show. I was a film critic. I was like the Siskel and Ebert of Sweden, you know, on national television.
Yeah.
But we were all friends, so we just had a long talk, and we said, let's stay in touch, and we didn't, and that's the last I ever saw him. I didn't go to any of the late shows that they did, and we never met again, and it kills me. And I'm not going to say that, you know, I'm not in any way going to downplay what he did. And unlike a lot of other people, he owned up to what he did in the sense that he admitted that he did it.
Yeah.
But of course it's sad. He was another really. He was. I mean, the thing is, my sense of Jon was that he wasn't as fucked up, and that's what. I don't know if you know Andreas, who's the vocalist for Death Stars, who's sort of like a Marilyn Manson type band in Sweden.
Right. But like Jon's brother is the guitarist in that band.
Yeah, totally. So Andreas was a hangaround. They're from the same area.
Yeah.
In Sweden. So they grew up together, and he has a lot of stories and a lot of fun stories. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And he confirms, you know, that feeling that I had as well, that Jon was a really, really cool guy.
Yeah.
Until he got with other people, and then the competition about who was eviler than that came in.
Yeah.
Like that, you know? And then all of a sudden he was, you know,
Captain Grim.
100%, 110% hardcore.
Yeah.
You have to be, all of a sudden, you got to sell your record collection because music brings you joy. So let's sell your entire record collection because it's not evil liking music. It was just like, more than anything, I'd like to put them over my lap and fucking spank their little baby bottoms because it's just fucking silly.
Yeah.
But then people die, and then it's not silly anymore. Then it's just sad. You know.
Yeah.
The same thing goes for Norway. I mean, I didn't know anyone really in the Norway scene. I met Pelle like fleetingly, but of the Norwegians, no. I'd never met Euronymous. I definitely never met Barb. But I just get that sensation when you go like, these are fucked up kids who got an incredible boost for doing cool stuff. Yeah. And it was cool. You can't take that away. Yeah. I mean, if you look at stuff like early Dark Throne, which I think is immensely better than Mayhem, but that's just me.
100% better than Mayhem.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think it's too hard to be better than Mayhem. But I do like Necromancer. I think he's really, really cool. And I saw Mayhem in LA with Scott Carlson, actually, like 2 or 3 years ago. And it was a weird ass show. Were you with us there? Did you go to that show?
No, I think I skipped it because like I fucking like black metal, not the band. I can deal with the band people if that stuff happens.
Yeah, but the crowd.
But the crowd like just fucking constant. The one show that I was at with you was the Venom Inc. show.
Yeah. So no, but I thought it was a really cool show, and I thought it was really good, and we talked afterwards, and we hung out a bit, and it was great. But back then, it was just like, let's not have any fun, and it's just like, yeah, why? It's just fun. And to me, it's just like, I don't care if a band is cracking or not, but when kids start dying, it's not a good thing. Let's just agree on that.
There's one parallel.
So to me, I mean, the most important people that keep popping up when I talk to people who are either younger or have recently discovered the scene. I mean, the three people that get mentioned all the time, they're going to be Quorthorn, Pelle, and Ohlin.
Yep.
Those are the three. And out of and they're quite different people. Quorthorn died from a heart failure. I mean, it was just, he died in his apartment. So, while Jon killed himself and Pelle killed himself. And just from the details that I know, that Quorthorn was very uncomfortable with what was going on in Norway and thought it was terrible that he was associated with it. That people said that they were inspired by Bathory because he felt, what the fuck are these guys doing?
Yeah.
And the problem with Quorthorn is that you can't really trust any interviews with him because he's always fucking with everyone.
Yeah.
So he'll tell a different story for every interview that's ever made, So anyone that says, well, I know for a fact this and that, because Quorthorn said so in an interview. Yeah, right, And then look up 5 other interviews and he'll say 5 other things, That's just the way it is. But I think Quorthorn is absolutely amazing. The fact that a lone, kind of strange Swedish guy is one of the easily the most. I mean, one of the 5 most important people in extreme music of all time.
Yep.
It's just weird. And it's so fucking cool. And it just goes to show that if you've been, if you really put your mind to it, things can happen. But and I wish I'd known him. I just wrote some letters with him. But I am very good, very, very good friends with his fiancée that no one really knows who it is.
Right.
And some of her friends, but she doesn't want to talk about it. She'll talk about it in private.
Yeah.
But she doesn't want to be associated with it.
Yeah.
And the reason is very simple: is that she has kids and a normal life now, and a normal life back then too. I think he was a pretty normal guy. She doesn't want to wake up and all of a sudden there's like 5 Chilean black metal heads in her backyard wanting to take photos.
Yeah.
It's a private life. I can completely understand that. But I really wonder, if, for instance, if Pelle had gotten professional help, what would have happened? His professional help became Euronymous.
Yeah.
That might have not been the best trick a trouble team could have. So, and I was really moved. I don't know if you've read the book Blood, Fire, Death.
Yep.
It's a Swedish book about Swedish metal scene. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot of stuff on it has on Quorthorn as well, but on Pelle. And there's a scene in the book where Necrobutcher, or I think the full band, but I think Necrobutcher more than anyone, who seems like the most sensible person, reflective person in the band, meets up with Pelle's brothers, who I know, and they just meet and talk, and it's like, fuck, we've been struggling with this since it happened, but this is his family. I mean, Necrobutcher is saying this, that I can't imagine what these guys have gone through. The legacy of having your brother's brains all over record covers and whatever. It's just, and that's the legacy of playing in an extreme art form that there's a lot of people who can't draw that line, where it's just and that image of Pelle is interesting. It's become a copyright thing, because that was the only way to get around it. His brothers didn't want the photo of Pelle with his brains blown out all over the internet and all over the world and on record covers and everything else for obvious reasons. And some people they talked to took him down. Some people just said, fuck you, this is black metal. So what they did was they talked to Euronymous' father, who inherited the right. Euronymous took the photo. When he died, his father inherited the copyright to the photo from a legal standpoint. And he has given the legal rights to Pelle's brothers. So Pelle's brothers do have the legal right. Anytime someone posts the picture of Pelle's suicide, say on Facebook or something, they have the legal backing to go in and say, we own this photo, we ask you to take this photo down. And that's not because they're going to sue people, it's because they wanted control of the photo and not have it everywhere, which I completely understand. So that's what's happened with that. The cool side of it is that there's a bunch of Pelle stuff that no one's ever seen, and I'm not sure. We might get into a book I'm working on later, but I'm not sure that's going to get in there. We'll see what happens. But there are, like horror drawings done by Pelle when he was a teenager and stuff that no one has ever seen that his brothers have. I would love to show it to the world, but it's completely up to them.
Yeah, was that all the stuff that sort of like had his morbid fascination with like, I think Dracula?
We all like horror movies. I mean, obviously, we like zombie flicks, but just because you are a Tom Savini fan doesn't mean you're going to kill your friends. I mean, that's exactly what we kept saying when we were listening to Autopsy. Mom, I'm not going to kill my friends because I listen to Seven Survivors. And then some people did. And you just got to realize that. Well, there's an Eric Clapton album called "There's One in Every Crowd," and that's just the way it is. So, is the murder-suicide rate higher in metal circles? No, probably not. It's probably about the same. But makes for a better headline that someone kills their friend over a black metal album than because you slept with my girlfriend. So it's going to get more publicity. But I seriously, I don't think. I've kept my eye on. You have once in a while you get some headlines from this guy from Obituary did that or this one did that, whatever But I don't really get the feeling that there's a lot going on. There was the church burnings, which was sort of in Norway a lot, and that was obviously a thing that was going on and people were jumping on it. I think that one I think is really sad. I'm about as atheist as you can get. That doesn't mean that like 600-700-year-old churches should be burned down. I think that's kind of crap.
And that was Fred's sentiment on it too. Like he was just like, I don't give a fuck about Christianity, but like honestly, what's the point?
This is cultural heritage, and it's just like saying, well, I'm an atheist, so I hate druids. Therefore, I'm gonna crush the Stone Age. It's like, why?
Why?
Fucking grow up, But hey, I don't know. I realized as we were talking guitars, I have another guitar right behind me here.
Let's
show that. It's unplayable right now because there's I think it's actually up here. A tuner that's gotten loose.
Fuck.
So it needs to be fixed. Taken to the shop because I'm not going to do it. But it's a really beat up old SG. This was Uffe Cederlund's go-to SG after from sort of the Wolverine Blues area and a bit further than that. It's really beat up, like every fucking Gibson ever. It's got a broken neck.
Yeah.
So that one's glued. but it's still a cool guitar. It's hard as fuck to play, especially with thick ass strings.
What do you mean by it's hard as fuck to play? Like what's not?
I don't know. It's the action or whatever. But I didn't want to change it. I wanted to keep it the way that Uffe plays it. But it's like playing on fucking barbed wire. It's just like your fingers bleed in 10 minutes. And it's you really gotta work it. And it has a lot of damage to the frets. So if you bend on certain frets, it's gonna go clang, you know. But that's sort of what this one is. And it's got, a bad replacement. This one is completely wrong. But it's supposed to be. I mean, if I wanted a mint, beautiful SG, I'd buy one. Yeah. And I wanted this because it's a classic Entombed.
That's amazing. So that did Wolverine Blues Studio.
I think he played that one on Wolverine Blues and a lot of tours and stuff. And then he switched to a brown SG that he had.
Yeah, the 70s one.
He actually had a Kramer for a short while, right between Left Hand Path and Clandestine. He was playing a black Kramer Beretta for a while, but that wasn't long lived.
Yeah.
I think everyone just wanted to find something that would hold tuning at 5 half notes down, and a tremolo.
Still hitting the
bottom. So, it was just, obviously insane.
But that's cool, like, to think that they went from, like, the full crazy EMG 85s, 81s and stuff like that, back to just, like, passive pickups, regular Gibsons.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the thing is, Alex always had, in the early days, Alex had this ugly-ass BC Rich. That looked, like kind of like a Kerry King. It was just like the pointy everywhere. And it had a collar tremolo that was terrible. It went out of tune easily. And then Uffe had that Ibanez GT 350 that was just fucking cool. And it's funny because they were both sort of like pointy heavy metal guitars, but one looked good and I always hated BC Rich.
Yeah.
They always look fucking silly, like a Christmas tree, I don't think you should play death metal on a BC Rich, but that's just. By the way, I was looking through the pile of fanzines here. There's one funny one here that I had forgotten that was just in my pile here from '87. This is Damage Incorporated. This is the fanzine that Maniac of Mayhem did in '87. It's got a big Necrophagia interview and a bunch of other stuff. And this is just when he got into Mayhem. So there's actually an article on Mayhem with himself in the band. And there's a band photo with Maniac in the middle right there. And,
Jesus.
And stuff going on.
Why do you think Maniac wasn't featured in Lords of Chaos?
I don't know. I don't really know. I think
that part bothered me to no end.
Like everything else, they wanted to cut it down, And
I guess.
But I think an interesting thing when reading Maniac's magazine is just how much punk rock was involved in that scene. It's just like, I mean, like on the editorial page, it's a photo of him and he's wearing a Cramps t-shirt. So it's just people were just all over the place.
But can you
make up? I mean, the first promo shots of Mayhem with Maniac, he's wearing a Dead Kennedy shirt.
Yeah. Well, I've always said, like, I can hear,
so I think you just gotta, realize that it was all over. I mean,
I can always hear punk in Death Crush. Like, there's
of course,
punk all through those riffs.
Yeah.
So.
And the same thing with the early Swedish death metal stuff is that there's a lot of like hard crust punk stuff in there. And
absolutely. D-beat everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember we were Nicke Andersson and me were getting drunk at a bar, and this is probably around like 91 in Stockholm, and there were some guys sitting next to us, and they were a little bit older, a few years older. And it turns out they were from like early hardcore punk bands, like Svartsnö, Svartparad, stuff like that. And Nicke was just like, God, there's so much, so much of your stuff in what we do. And they were like, yeah, but you play fucking metal, it sucks. And he was like, but please, I really like your stuff. And they're like, yeah, but we really like that metal. Which is kind of a good lesson, you know, when you sort of assume that everyone is impressed that you were inspired by them, and then you go, yeah, but you turn it off shit. But that's kind of funny. I really like Black Uniforms and obviously Discharge. Not Discharge, Anti-Seamix.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
a lot of the Swedish crust stuff is really, really cool.
Totalita and No Security for me as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely No Security. I was going to wear my No Security shirt on here. I was like,
Oh, that's good. Did you see can you even see in the webcam what I'm wearing? This is funny. This is probably my most worn out shirt ever.
I was going to say, it looks worn out.
This is the Roar shirt.
It's the what?
But it's so fucking washed out that it's impossible to tell his voice.
What shirt is it?
It's just like some red dots over here. But yeah, it is actually a Roar shirt. So.
Wow.
But speaking of shirts, I've got something here for every sort of death metal aficionado. The most rare old shirts that I forgot to show you. Now, there are insane collectors, and I think that's really sad. I've never been a collector. I'm a hoarder. I've got a bunch of stuff that I've always had. But to pay money now to get old stuff from the underground back then,
that seems...
I just fuck off. It's just like, I'd rather give it to a kid on the street, you know? It's just like, what are you trying to achieve?
Does it seem to you like...
and you're spending half your paycheck buying demos from 87?
Yeah. But does it seem to you like relics being put into like the English museum, like out of Egypt? Like that, it seems like it's taking away from its natural environment.
To me, it's not so much you don't deserve this. To me, it's more like if you have $2,000 to spend on a demo tape,
right,
then you should have that demo tape.
Right.
And it's that sort of feeling. So no, but I brought this here. This is the first Nihilist shirt. It's got some blood on it, and it's got some holes in it, and it's dirty as fuck because I don't dare wash it, actually. There's a reprint around now, but this is the original. And obviously, it's supposed to have the Mac 1 label, which is the real one.
Yeah.
Now, this one was made in 5 copies. And this is, as far as I know, this is the only one surviving. There might be one left over. The story behind this one is... one of the members had a mom who worked at a place that could print T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
So she made one for each band member. So there were 5. Each band member got a shirt, and no one gave a fuck. And then they made, proper T-shirts. You have the one with the ghost that looks sort of like Scooby-Doo. That was the first shirt. That one was made in 25 copies. You can see Chris wearing it on the back photo of Seven Survival. That's one of 25 copies making its way to San Francisco, which is really, really cool. There's actually also the inside of Seven Survival has all these photos of like drunk and stoned people and like collage. And one of them is Nicke Andersson headbanging. That's actually from a photo sent from Sweden.
Wow.
They just put in there. But what happened with this one was that no one cared. I mean, it wasn't like anything was memorabilia. 90 or 91, it was just an old shirt. No one cared. So this one and a couple of other shirts was inside Nicke Andersson's bass drum in the rehearsal room. Just that. So Uffe Cederlund just grabbed it and said, "Oh, this is fun. I'll keep this one," because he wasn't in the band when they were made.
Yeah.
And then many years later, my son turned 18, and Uffe gave this to him on his birthday. And then my son said, "I'm traveling." My son is a chef. He's 24 years old now. I'm traveling all over the world. Blah blah blah. I'm just going to lose this. So please, take care of it for me. So that's why I had it.
That's amazing.
But it's funny because there was a guy, I think in France, who offered me $1,500 or $2,000 for it.
Wow.
No way.
Never.
I'm not that desperate. You don't need that shirt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You don't need that shirt. If Cederlund has a son who's 15,
yeah,
who likes death metal, he might need that shirt.
Yep.
I mean, pass it on, but don't sell it to a collector. Give it to a fucking kid on the sidewalk who's got a boombox playing Cryptic Slaughter. Whatever, I don't care. But I've got tons of stuff. I don't know if I'll hang on to it, but I definitely don't want to sell it.
Hell no.
I just think it's just no. And all of it, once in a while you see this people, and I understand if people have financial problems, fine, sell your gear and sell your stuff and pay the rent. I don't want your kids on the street. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that if you don't need it, don't see it as an investment that you played in a fucking demo band when you were 14.
Yeah.
Be happy that someone cares. And if you see another 14-year-old, give him the shirt.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's amazing. Hell yeah.
And my son actually recorded his Sunlight. They were playing death metal, and he was probably about 15. And they went up and they did 2 songs with Thomas Cook's in Sunlight. So that was really cool. That was fucking full circle.
I mean, that has to be like some sort of weird fucking like day meets night shit.
It's kind of weird. It is kind of weird, yeah. So many things like that. And the funny thing is that my kids, I mean, my son is 24, my daughter is 16. And a lot of the sort of new wave death and black metal, they're around 30.
Yeah.
Now. So when my son was, in high school, they'd be like 20 and acting really cool and really tough, and they had all these bands that I'm not going to mention now, but you can guess who they are.
Yeah.
And they'd be telling all these stories about the good old days, and it's kind of like the Old West, It's just like, oh yeah. This is seen in Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, with English Bob.
Yeah.
The Duck of Death, when he goes, but I was there.
Yeah.
And this is what really went down, He was so drunk he couldn't even fire his pistol, that kind of thing, And I get that feeling because my son would come home and he'd be like, "Yeah, I was this party. This guy got really cocky and he told me about how incredibly fucking cool this and that was, And I'd be like, "Oh, really? That was the time he puked in his own knee and his girlfriend laughed at him and left him and blah blah blah." And it's just like you just realize how these stories grow with the telling and how and I think that as I mentioned with Lords of Chaos also, there's one thing that I think is important to bring out, and that's not to degrade it. One of the things to always point out is that these were fucking kids.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more amazing what they accomplished.
Yep.
But these weren't evil masterminds. These weren't fucking hardcore. It didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. These were kids, and they did cooler music than you can even imagine. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that I like bringing up. And one of the things I'm working on right now, if you watch this for like 2 hours now, you were like, who is this fucking guy who never even released a proper album? Why is he in this interview? And I think that I would ask the same question. But I do have stories to tell from back in the day.
You're like essentially like...
But also I do work with some stuff that is connected to kind of things that you talk about. And one of the things is I'm working on a book right now. I have a publishing company in Sweden called Fandrake. If you've read Blood, Fire, Death, first of all, I was a fact checker on the Swedish death metal book by Jon Nodtveidt, because I do have a memory better than most people my age, and I did both fact checking and I did the English translation of Blood, Fire, Death, the other book about Swedish metal scene. So right now I'm in pre-production, you could say, on a photo book about the early Swedish death metal scene. And I would say that it's, if I'm going to compare it to anything, I guess it's kind of unfair because it's a fantastic fucking book, and I don't know if my book will be as nice.
Are you going to say Murder in the Front Row?
But I was going to say Only Death is Real, the How Amicable book.
Cool.
That sort of book. So more of an official book.
That was an
because
amazing
there's
book.
Two well-written books about Swedish death metal. I don't really need to write another. But there's so many classic photos that people have only seen, fourth generation Xerox copies of.
Yeah.
There are tons of photos that no one has ever seen. There are original logos. There are, flyers. We'll see where we end up with it. We're doing research and collecting stuff right now. One of the challenges is, you find people, they have stuff, and then things sort of take time, and all of a sudden you got to start from the beginning again. Oh yeah, you were working on a book, weren't you? No, I think I put it somewhere in the garage and whatever. Yeah. You never know. But then sometimes you lit a fire under people, and you get results from it. You never know. I do a lot of concerts with symphony orchestras. It's mainly, probably my main income is I work as a external producer in the symphony orchestra world, doing film and music concerts and music from video games. If we were going to do a concert, we did a concert like 2 years ago with the theme Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
We did Gladiator and Hunger Games and Indiana Jones and stuff like that. And we were thinking about a follow-up. It's kind of obvious that we were going to do like villains and bad guys. So I wanted to do music from The Usual Suspects by Jon Ohlin. It's a really good soundtrack, and he's a giant in Hollywood now, but he one of his breakthrough soundtracks. So through a friend, I managed to get a hold of his private address, because you can't email like an agent for stuff like that. You'll get stuck in limbo for like 5 years.
Yeah.
They're looking for an angle. How can we get money out of this? You got to get straight to the person. So I emailed him and I said, hey, I'm doing this. I've done this for 15 years. We do some really good stuff, and I'm friends with Gary that put us together. I really, really like The Usual Suspects music. We'd love to have your blessing to play it, and you wouldn't happen to have the original score somewhere. And he answered in like half a day. He said, oh wow, that's really cool. I don't know if it's ever been performed live, and this was back in the early 90s, so it was all handwritten. I don't have any files or anything. This was handwritten score. But I'll look for it, and that's the kind of thing where you go, okay, that's never going to happen. Just as with someone having old photos of death metal rehearsals or whatever.
Yeah,
I'll look for it. And then, like 4 hours later, he emails back and he goes, oh, I've been out in the garage going through all the old crates. I found the full score from the studio recording. So I'm going to FedEx that to you to Sweden, because he was just really happy. And then it was a Saturday and he had time off. And that's the thing, when you do stuff like that, is that you catch me here. You make someone happy about contributing, and maybe I can look through this, and maybe I can find that, and all of a sudden, you're looking through stuff, and you go, oh wow, I have a full fucking roll of old carcass photos here, from 1990. Wow. That I just shot at a show. But so
holy
with
shit!
Sweden with Carcass and Entombed in I think 1990, and that's for me the most important thing about that is one of those nights. Just as I said, when I brought home those 3 albums with Slayer and Celtic Frost and Destruction, that show, Entombed opening for Carcass in Fagersta, Sweden, was a great show. But more importantly, got a cassette tape that night from Uffe Cederlund and said, "Here, this we mixed our first album. It's going to be called Left Hand Path. Here is the final mix on tape." So driving back, my friend was old enough to have a driver's license. Driving back home at night, middle of winter in Sweden, driving through the forest, for the first time ever, listening to Left Hand Path. And that was just
before it even came out.
Fucking amazing. And then you get older and you know all these people and blah blah blah. And you kind of miss that sensation,
Yeah.
It's both ways. I mean, speaking of my kids, I mean, several metal heads in Sweden would idolize Scott Carlson, who I love to death. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
And then oh, he's so fucking evil and blah blah blah. And then my son would be 18 me like, yeah, we were there like 2 months ago making tacos at Scott and Aaron's. And then you go, then I love that your family and everything, but you sort of lose some of the mystery as well, I guess.
Yeah.
But one of the most lovable people in the world.
Absolutely. I think he would be mortified to be thought of as any type of like gruff or abrasive type of person. Like, he is the most. I've watched him stand at a show and be punished by like the biggest fans ever, and he just like my experience with Lars from Metallica.
Yeah.
Scott is the exact same nature, and he spent all the time that they wanted with him.
Yeah.
Even to his detriment of missing part of whatever show we were at. I was like, that's really fucking commendable.
That's one of the things, though. I agree with you, but that's one of the things that kind of irritates me. I was in LA like a month ago, and this was just a few days. Now I'm going to do a soundtrack for this. This was a few days before Corona hit.
Right.
I just had something in my throat. But
it's called Corona.
I was there with my assistant for work.
Yep.
I had the time to meet Scott and Aaron and some other people. And Opeth were in town.
Yep.
And I'm not a big Opeth fan at all. But people are, old friends, especially all other sound technicians at old friends. Yep. So we went to see Opeth at the Palladium. Now, first of all, I got to mention the fact that a beer at the Palladium in a fucking plastic cup is $20. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Going to a metal show and having a beer that's $20. It's just that's a steak and a glass of wine.
Yeah.
But what really pissed me off was standing in the crowd, and I'm not saying like, oh, this is like on a VIP balcony or anything. Like, dead center, good side, let's say right between the stage and the soundboard, so, on the floor.
Yeah.
No one was fucking watching the show.
What are they doing?
Everyone around us was in small crowds, talking, babbling, checking their emails, blah blah blah. No one was watching the show.
Wow.
And I was just like, and the volume was not that high. It wasn't that loud.
Right.
So I was just like, I'm hearing like 15 different conversations here from people talking about they had a rough day at work, they did this and that. It felt like, dropping into a coffee shop and people are like babbling away. And I'm like, if you want to watch, as I said, I'm not a big fan. I went by just, for the fun of it. But if this was a band I paid good money to see.
Yeah.
And paid $20 to a beer. I'd be really pissed off.
Right.
Watch the fucking show.
Yeah.
Or go home. It's like people talking in the fucking movie theater. Go home, watch Netflix, talk all you want, but if you sit next to people, pay good money to see something that they're maybe are only going to see once, shut the fuck up. I get really annoyed at that. I'm just like, and then someone go, it's really loud. Why are you bothered by someone talking? Because I can hear them.
Yeah.
And because you're distracting from why we're supposed to be here, which is watching the guys on stage or girls if it happen to be that.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah, but I think that also speaks to. I mean, there's parts of Opeth's career that I actually really enjoy. Like one of their albums when they put out the Damnation album back in like 2003. For some reason, I always play that album on flights to help with my flying anxiety because I don't have a problem with like being high, like in the air. I have a problem with being stuck with a herd of disgusting people. On my way somewhere in a seat that just feels like death, and I don't want to be sitting there because my regular flying pattern is always Australia to LA, which feels like death.
Now the worst flying I ever did probably was I was going to hold a keynote actually at the Sydney Opera House for a big conference. And the organizers were, they suggested a flight from Sweden to Australia, which is obviously expensive as fucking and really long.
Yeah.
And then I looked at it, I Googled a little bit, and I said, for less money, you can buy me a round-trip ticket to LA, and then a round-trip ticket from LA to Sydney.
Yep.
That means I don't have to fly the full distance. I get a couple of days in LA.
Yep. And
you get a cheaper ticket. And they said, great, fine. But that meant I flew to LA, which is kind of a trip too. That's like 11 hours or something like that.
Yep.
And then I was there for like 2 days, and then I flew to Australia. And that's the worst fucking jet lag I've had in my life. Because I was already a bit screwed up coming to LA. And then I flew over Dateline. I flew on a Tuesday night, came to Sydney Thursday morning.
6 o'clock in the morning usually.
Yeah. And I was awake for like 5 days in Sydney. And I met some awesome people, some really, really cool people there. And then I flew home, and then I slept for like a week because I was so fucking gone in my head. But that's the worst trip I've ever made as far as, flying and jet lag goes. It was going the wrong way to Sydney.
It's
the only time I've been to Australia, actually.
Well, once you go past like that international date line or whatever, like going backwards, like into the next day somehow,
I know,
is like the worst fucking thing for the human body to ever adjust to. And I've done it more than like 30 times in my life. And
that's what you're so fucked up, mate.
Exactly. That would explain everything about my personality.
That's it. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else fun. Yeah, we could talk a little bit more about, what sort of happened then.
Well,
I mean,
but
I think Swedish death metal sort of, as much as I love early Doctrine. I think Benus is a fun fucking guy. I really like it. But we don't know each other, but I mean, obviously follow what he does. But I think there's one point to the Norwegian black metal thing, and that's the fact that, Sweden really dropped the ball on death metal. It just became too scattered. It became mainstream and sort of bloated in a way that any out there young culture shouldn't.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Entombed were, the house band on fucking game shows and things like that. It was just like Dismember were doing their thing. It was just like, it was a mess.
Is it that time where
this is basically the years I was away. Then all of a sudden people are grown up. All of a sudden people are 25, 30. And it's a different thing. And people are trying to make a viable career out of having a band. And most musicians have realized that that's not going to happen. So they've got a proper job. And then you find a job that's okay with the fact that you're going to go on tour once a year. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Some people manage to sort of only do the rock thing. People like Jon Nodtveidt, where you just, this is what I do. But then you sort of adjust your expense levels to that as well. You might move someplace, kind of like Specman. You move someplace where the rent is cheap because you're not going to make a lot of money, but that's fine. That's a personal decision. But in a way, we reached a point where everyone wanted to become artistic in a way. And I don't know, it's just Entombed did a ballet. I don't know if everyone knows that, but it was, I think it was released on at least a CD. It was at the Royal Ballet in Stockholm. And it was two people who were sort of performance artists that contacted Entombed and said, we would like to make a ballet with the music of Entombed, and then it turned into them playing live to dancers. And it was really far out, but it was kind of cool. It was okay. It was kind of fun. It was far out. Then you've got the whole symphony orchestra thing going. And that, I might as well mention that. I was involved in that a little bit. It was first done with a small orchestra in Sweden, and that was still while LG was in the band. It was a guy who contacted the band and said, I'm in the orchestra world, but I'm a death metal fan, so I've written the full Clandestine album, rearranged for symphony orchestra. So they did that with a small orchestra, and that sounded like shit. I heard the recordings and it was terrible, but that's fine. It was a one-off thing. And then the whole thing with LG happened, and the band split, whatever you want to say. Then I got asked to do vocals for another show. That was in Gävle, a town a couple of hours north of Sweden. And now I do think that the Mummy shows turned out really well. I met a lot of people, even came up in the street to me and said that was a really cool concert experience. And I think the combination of the symphony orchestra thing and then that sort of Entombed reunion show afterwards really brought it together. But I wouldn't want to do it again. It was really, really tiresome. It became clear to me that I've been working in the symphony orchestra world for 15 years, and I'm sorry, but Alex of Entombed, who sort of masterminded it, is a complete amateur in that sense. And it's extremely frustrating being a carpenter standing next to a baker trying to build a chair. And you go like, if I could only step in here and do this, but then they go, no, I got this. That sort of feeling, so I'm not going to do anything like that again.
Yeah.
Just because I feel that, first of all, I'm not sure that a classic death metal album should be. It feels sort of like, Metallica with a symphony orchestra. It is kind of silly, and we all know that. But even if it sounds good, if it sounds good, I wouldn't want to do it unless I'm in control. And I shouldn't be in control because I'm not in Entombed. It's not my thing. There was a discussion when that project started up. Could my company that I run do it? As I have a vast experience in the symphony orchestra world with contracts and what have you. And I just said no, because I know that I will not be in control.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is, Walk with God, do your thing, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's basically it. And then people will go, oh, this is silly, why are they doing this with symphony orchestra? Because people do stuff that they think is going to be fun.
Yeah,
and people have ambitions, and they do cool stuff, and all of a sudden someone, oh, can you do a movie soundtrack? Yeah, sure, I'll do that. People jump on stuff because they want to, and that's just the way it is. But once you've done it, you realize this was not fun. This was more pain than it was fun.
Right.
Then you don't do it a second time, and that's where I'm at with the symphony orchestra Entombed thing.
Right.
I was digging through photos as we were talking, and this is from when I had the fanzines. So this is probably 88 or 89. Nuclear Assault playing Stockholm. This is Danny.
Look at Danny.
Danny is probably 24 here, 23, 24, something like that.
Wow.
In a prom shirt.
Yeah.
Some live photos as well from that concert. Let's see. Yeah, here he is in a concrete sock shirt, actually. Oh, the poor little kid. It's great fun. And then here is the original flyer for the Nirvana 2002 demo.
Wow.
That's Dungeons and Dragons artwork. Of course, that you should. Dead tired of boring death metal. This is the new cool band that you should be in. And a photo that a lot of people have seen. It was featured in Daniel Eckerup's Swedish death metal book. But that I took with just a pocket camera. And this is from the same night. This is right before the Nuclear Assault show in central Stockholm.
Ooh.
So all of these four guys are Treblinka. This is Johan later of Tiamat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Nicke Andersson in the hat.
I was going to say, that it looked exactly like Nicke Andersson.
Yeah.
What was
so
with
this
the
was
hat?
the eating spot. It was called the Map. You can see the map in the background there. It's one of those. It was a city map, and it was paid advertisements. So there were buttons, so you could an advertisement for a restaurant. Push that button, and you could see a light turn on the map.
Right.
This is where this is at the central station in Stockholm. So it was for tourists. But that was where you would meet up in '88 if you were into death metal. See you at the Map. You knew at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock Friday night, there'd be 20 or 30 death metal heads there, and then you would okay, is there anything happening? Is there a show? No. Is there a party? No. Well, we'll go to this park and get drunk. And whatever. Sit in the grass.
Which is still something that's completely foreign to me. Europe, you're allowed to drink in public.
It depends. It actually depends. In Sweden, it sort of depends. But hell, if you're 15, who cares?
Yeah.
You drink if you want to drink. But trying to figure out if I have anything else really fun to show you.
Yeah, I was gonna say what is the one thing you want to end with?
What do I want to end with? I could have possibly. Let me see. Oh, it's another Nihilist flyer. with the address on the backside to Nicke's father, which is,
that's amazing.
That was the kind of thing that you would get all the time. But give me 1 second.
Sure.
I don't think I showed this. This is the original 7-inch. It's so funny because, it was expensive releasing an LP if you didn't have a record label.
Right.
But a 7-inch was at least sort of affordable. So this was a 7-inch that was released probably in 90 in Sweden. It's fucking terrible. It looks like that. It's a terrible cover. And it's got 3 thrash bands and Nirvana 2002 on it.
Right. That's
and the band's paid for it. It's kind of funny because it was a label.
Yeah.
Of an underground fanzine or something. But it was kind of like a pay-to-play thing, you know?
Yep.
You had to buy 250 copies of this.
Yep.
And then you get it up. I only have like 5 left, I think, or something. But, you know,
God damn.
It's just fun. We did a reunion show. We did a couple of reunion shows back in the day when... no, I never got into that. I can tell you that story.
Yeah, tell us about the relapse, sort of like picking you guys up out of obscurity.
Yeah. You'll have to figure out what to do with it. But when the book Swedish Death Metal came out, but then in April, he was going to do a release party, and he said, I really want Grotesque and Nirvana 2002 to play. And we said, what the fuck? Yeah, let's do it. You know, we'll play 3 songs. Because we didn't have time to rehearse or anything. But and we had never played a show before. So somehow the dates got messed up. So as it came closer, it turned out that our drummer was going to be on a tour with the jazz band in Europe, and it's like, fuck. So Robert of the Helicopters, who's a very old friend, and it's kind of funny that I introduced him to Nicke Andersson. He grew up in our small town,
right? And
I came down to parties in like the early 90s. He was like a heavy metal kid, and then he discovered death metal and joined in with the rest of us. So he played, and it was great fun. It was a great show, and then for some reason, Relapse got in touch with us. I think it was because of the book, which was on the Zillion Points. I had been in talks with a guy on Relapse a few years earlier about releasing the Nirvana stuff, and it just never happened. And then, you know, they emailed us again, and I mentioned this, and they go, "Oh, that guy. Well, he left the company after, you know, like 3 years ago." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So no one knew about that we were in talks. So they said, "We want to release your stuff," and I said, "Sure." I think they'd done the God McCarver compilation already.
Yeah.
So I said, "Sure, let's do that." But as always, I want control. I want to, you know, be, you know, everything from album cover to mixing to whatever. And they said, "Fine, you know, just as long as it's not, you know, your little baby brother doing the cover artwork, and we need to have control that it's not going to turn out like shit." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." You know. I can tell you that I had an incredibly good working relation with Relapse.
Yep.
Nothing to say about them at all.
Everyone of Relapse is amazing.
Both making the compilation and sort of royalty payouts and stuff like that.
Yeah. Rennie is awesome. Drew is awesome. Bob is awesome.
Yeah. It was just like very professional. And I really want to say that. So once we'd done that, we got asked to do a couple of shows. So we did a total, including the book release party, we did 5 reunion shows. Now, 3 of those were absolutely horrible, and 2 were pretty good. So the good ones were the book release party and a show that we did in Stockholm at a venue called the Baser.
Love that venue.
That was pretty cool. And there was a lot of friends were there, and a lot of the old timers were there. And we played a show in Finland that was pretty bad. We were badly rehearsed, and we weren't good. There was nothing wrong with the crowd, nothing wrong with the show, but we weren't that good. And we did a late reunion show many years later, where we were the old farts. And the only reason I agreed to do this show was my son had a death metal band, and he was like 15. And I said, if they can open up, we'll do the show. So they opened up, and they fucking kicked our ass. and that's good. You know, that's the way it should be, you know. Yeah. So they played, and that was sort of his introduction into the death metal scene, and he started hanging out with, you know, a bunch of people that were a little bit older than him, but that was really cool. But I think overall the worst experience was Milwaukee Death Fest. It was just a fucking nightmare. And coming from Europe, but coming from Europe, where music festivals are professional.
Yeah.
It's just like, you can't imagine the difference. It's just, I would say that playing a Swedish metal festival compared to Milwaukee Death Fest would be comparing doing WrestleMania or your drunk neighbor's backyard wrestling party.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's beyond amateurs and really cocky and bullshit. And we were booked to do Milwaukee Death Fest, and all of a sudden, plenty of old friends, Swedish bands, contacted us and said, "Don't go. Don't go." I'm not going to say who they were because I don't want to get them into trouble, but said, "This is a fucking nightmare. These guys have no idea what they're doing, and they're fucking amateurs. And they'll probably screw you along the way." And we said, "No, well, we got to do this. It's going to be great fun." And we went over. We didn't get paid at all. They paid for the flight tickets and a hotel room, granted, but we didn't get paid to play. And we rented a fucking rehearsal space in Stockholm and stuff. Because we're not an active band. We had to rehearse just to do the show. So we did that. And we get over there, and if you know anything about European bands touring in the States, you need a work permit, and that costs a lot of money. So you gotta sneak into the country, and you can't do that carrying like 4 guitars with you. So we didn't bring a backline. That was agreed on, because if you're gonna go do one-off gig, you're gonna borrow your gear, your backline. That was agreed on. We come there, and we got our bags with us, and we end up, and plenty of you have probably been to Milwaukee Death Fest. I'm sure it's great fun if you're in the crowd and you're drunk. But if you come there as a band, you go, and it's like, okay, where's the backstage area? Oh, there is none. Just put your bags here. Usually stuff don't get stolen here on the parking lot. It's like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Is there any food? No, it's all out. But maybe we can buy you a hot dog. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on here? And then it turns out that the backline that was promised wasn't there. There was supposed to be a guitar for me, and it's like, oh yeah, here's a completely unusable guitar. One of the 2 amps that we were going to use was broken, which we find out on stage. Scott, to his credit, runs off, finds Black Breath, and manages to borrow a guitar for me.
Hi, Eric. Eric is the best. That dude is my
We end up
friend.
starting the gig maybe 25, 30 minutes late because nothing is working and nothing is there that we've been promised. And we play maybe 3 songs, and then we get told, okay, this is your last song, you got to get off because your time isn't up. So we just flew to fucking Milwaukee to play 4 or 5 songs because the backline that we were promised wasn't there, and because everything else, every single thing was fucked up. And then the name calling started, and there was stuff on their website, and we were assholes, and we didn't know what we were doing. And it's like, sit down, shut the fuck up. This is amateur shit. And I'm sorry, but it's just a fucking joke. And so that was tragic. The good side, the good part of it was that Odyssey were playing with Danny actually on bass.
Yep.
And that was one of the best shows I've seen in my life.
Yep.
That was worth the fucking headache of going to that shit fest. So that show really, really made that weekend for me.
Absolutely.
Happy I went because of that. I met a bunch of old people that had, fucking legends of the scene that I've emailed, that I've written letters to, King of Deceased was there, people from Derketa were there. It was just like cool people that
Hi, Sharon.
Hello, that you want to hang out. But the festival itself, oh, what a fucking cesspool. And I'm 50 now. I'm not going to do any other. I'm not going to start another death metal band now. I'm a bit too old and tired for that. I'd rather chat with you and drink beer and listen to old albums. So I can say I will never play that fucking shitfest again. And it won't get me into trouble because I won't be invited to go there anyway. It's fine. I just want people to know that there are parts of the world where metal festivals are actually professional. They're not like a fenced-in parking lot where the guy running it is coked out of his mind and there's no backstage area.
Yep.
That's not like normal. That's happens to be normal some places in the world, but that's not what most bands are used to. So at least I managed to discourage some other bands to go there, but it's just So we just agreed not to play any more shows with Nirvana, and Eric and Lars really wanted to do something, and that ended up being Under the Church, and I'm really happy for them. Mm-hmm. I got asked to join, but I felt it would be kind of weird.
Yeah.
I mean, if all three original members of Nirvana 2002 start a new band, I don't know. It's just it feels done, over with.
Yeah,
you know. So I actually have. Eric sent me the very first recordings, like pre-recording for the first album, and said, "Oh, if you want to be in and do vocals on this." So I wrote some lyrics and I actually recorded them by myself, but I don't think I even sent it to him because as I was doing it, I just felt this is not my thing.
Yeah.
I wrote all the stuff basically for Nirvana, and I don't want to be a sidekick in someone else's nostalgia project.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that it's been working out, that it's been getting good traction, but I didn't feel like it was my thing.
Yeah.
And therefore not a part of it. But good luck to them, and they're playing. They're playing Stockholm if Corona goes over, in I think August or September, and I think I'm DJing, so I'll be seeing the guys again, which is great fun. So
hopefully Corona goes away.
Totally.
The one thing to end off on. What is one record you would say from Sweden that is Swedish people
just sums up, or no,
or that someone who is a record collector and who wants to have part of the Swedish musical lineage as part of their record collection, what should they buy?
Well, it's kind of hard to say. If we're going to skip Bathory, because that's so sort of before and out of the way of the Swedish stuff, it's not part of the scene. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be something by Bathory. But if we're talking the Swedish death metal scene, I think Left Hand Path is amazing. But if I'm going to pick one album of that era that just that's like a can of mace in the face, it would be the first Dismember album. I'm gonna say Hello Fred.
Hi Fred.
I would say Like an Ever-Flowing Stream is like getting maced in the face. If I think I've said it once in an interview, but if you think you're hot shit, do it, do a track like Dismembered, and then we'll talk. Because that fucking album is so intense, fucking in your face energy that and still such a vital sort of teen feeling to it.
Absolutely.
That I would say, because I absolutely love Left Hand Path, but it's so tinged with the older demos for me, where it's a cliche where you go, oh, the demo was better.
Yeah.
But to me, Like an Ever-Flowing Stream is such a fucking brick of an album.
Yeah.
That's the one I would get. I would get that one. It's got a great fucking dancey, great cover. It's got the blood photo on the back.
Yeah.
It's got controversial lyrics. It's got history.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm a grown-up and professional man these days, and I have an assistant, and that assistant, Maya, her father is Matti Kerki of this. So
wow.
I mean, and she's the age of my kids, you know, and to her, this is the music of the old farts like me, you know, and can understand, you know, and then we're the old guys. We're the golden oldies. But if you want to hear a golden oldie that really kicks you in the fucking nuts, then it's the first Dismember album.
That's the awesome way to end it off. And thank you for a marathon near 4 hours. So this is
how long? 4?
We're 6 minutes away from 4 hours. So.
Back in the day when you thought it was good fun to drink beer and take photos where you look grim in some sort of form. So this is me and Nicke Andersson standing about drunk on cheap beer in a forest. That's just the thing you do.
That is amazing.
That's the kind of thing you did when you were a kid back then.
That is absolutely
Tell
amazing.
the kids today and they don't believe you. But
yeah.
So that back patch is pretty fucking
wow. Yeah. Is that the one?
So thank you for having me. I'm really. Oh, here's an old Dismember flyer as well. Yeah, with Nicke Andersson artwork. So.
I've had that shirt before.
Yeah, I know that one. This was an ad for the first demo, or a flyer for the first demo. So.
Which
do you have the old fanzines, by the way?
Fucking awesome demo, by the way.
Yeah. Do you have the old fanzines, by the way?
No.
I've got it like. Not tons, but I probably have I have a pile of each. So next time I see you, I can bring them over if you want them.
Please.
Just